866, that's the Air Comfort Service text line to get involved in the show. You can check us out on YouTube as always, youtube.com/101ESPN I was running a little behind. I didn't realize that we were going to be on time today. I apologize. That's on me. Mizzou wins last night. Looks like one of the best teams in the country. Alex, that's as good as I've seen Mizzou play basketball literally since I was a freshman in college. 2011-12, Mizzou was an outstanding basketball team. They went 7 deep, and that might even be overstating it. They were really a 6-man team. They were not big, but they shot the hell out of the basketball. And the guys that got on the court were unbelievable. And they had this unique bond among them. And they were trying to prove everybody wrong because their coach left them to go down to Arkansas. They ended up with Frank Haith, and they said that they will reconcile by winning. Well, Missouri this past offseason, nobody had expectations for this team. Why would they? They went winless in conference play a year ago. Literally 0 wins. No team has ever done what Missouri is trying to do, which is go from winless in the conference to getting to like an Elite 8 Final Four. It's never happened before. But Missouri, Alex, looks like a team that is headed on that path right now. Mark Mitchell, outstanding. Tamar Bates basically didn't see the court in the second half last night, and he's been one of your best players on the season. Caleb Grill, oh my God. Some of the shots that he was making. Alabama was awesome last night, guys. Awesome. Unbelievable offensively, and it just didn't matter. It's the most points that Missouri has scored against a top 5 team in regulation since 1989. 35 years since the last time that Missouri did that against a team of that quality. Just an unbelievable performance last night at Mizzou Arena. I am embarrassed to say that I was not there. I got scammed out of tickets, and then we decided because of the weather not to go. It's on me. But if you're a Mizzou fan, maybe you should be thanking me for not being in the arena last night.
It's a loss.
What did you make of that win for the Tigers?
Man,
Alex?
I'm fully on board with this now. I've kind of been skeptical when you said Final Four, but after watching that performance, I'm all in on this team. The way that they played in that one, and really for me, the way that they always pushed back was, I thought, very important, because an Alabama team, even when their coach, Nate Oates, is just smashing clipboards on the middle of the court and getting teed up, I'm thinking it's like, okay, Alabama's going to go on a run here at some point, and how is Mizzou going to handle that? It really never took place, though. Like,
it did. There were about 5 minutes to go. They get down by 6.
Towards the end, okay.
And Missouri pushes back.
Well, they
immediately had a response, because when they got down by 6, they hit that huge 3. I think it was Sears that had it. That guy's unbelievable, dude. He's the best player I've seen in college basketball this year. Cooper Flagg's amazing. Sears is the guy that scares me. They got it down to 6, and Missouri immediately pushed it back to 10. And that was when I knew, okay, this is not the night that they're going to go through that slump like they did against Illinois or like they did against Memphis earlier in the season. They're going to have what it takes in the tank to be able to keep this one at bay.
Well, that's what I was going to say, because from like one TV timeout to another, they never allowed a 5 or more point run to Alabama. It was always like 2 or 3 points if Alabama was in front of them. And that was, for me, the most impressive factor into it, because I was waiting for Alabama to go on that, take the lead, or at least get within a shot possession and think like, okay, how is Mizzou going to handle this one? But every time Alabama pushed, Mizzou would push back. And it's just the dual elements that they have, whether it's the shooting ability, like you mentioned with Caleb Grill, knocking down shots everywhere, or if they want to play bully basketball. And I always reference that Kansas game. That's where it really became an eye-opener for me. If they want to play above the arc, they can. If they want to play down below, they can also do that. And like you mentioned, the 2012 team is the one that I think so many people, at least in our era, reference. That team couldn't play below the hoop. They had to shoot. And this team can do that. And I think Mark Mitchell said it after the game. No matter how a team wants to play us, we'll play that way, and they can't scout us.
That's what surprises me about this team. I thought they would potentially have some shooters. And I thought, okay, maybe Mark Mitchell becomes what he was supposed to be in college, and that allows you to have that driving threat to the bucket. But they didn't have an inside presence. And he didn't have a huge game last night, but Josh Gray has changed things for this team, man. He is an interior presence that allows them to go with 4 out and a 1 guy inside, and they're not getting destroyed on the glass the way that they did 2 years ago when they were a good team but a flawed team. They had no inside presence, and really they were exclusively a shooting team. That team didn't play defense. They didn't have an interior presence for the glass. That was it. This team can beat you in a million different ways, man. You want to play slow? Cool. They can find ways to win that way. Last night, Alabama wanted to run up and down the court. They played the fastest tempo in all of college basketball. Guess what Missouri did? They just beat them at their own game.
So they went faster.
Said, cool. You guys want to go fast? We'll go turbo speed. We'll go out there and we're going to run up and down the court to the point where you are now pressing because we're actually going at a pace that you're uncomfortable with. I knew Mizzou had a chance to win last night. I thought they had a real shot. I mean, Ken Palm was projecting them to win by like 1 point. Based on the Vegas line, it was like a 1 point line in favor of Mizzou last night as well. This was not a surprise that they won. The way that they won, the convincing nature of coming out and getting off to that 12-0 start, that's what surprised me. Them taking care of business and scoring 110, that was the surprise coming from last night. T-Bone, I know you're a hater, but what did you make of it last night?
I mean, credit to Mizzou, man, because that was impressive as hell. I mean, that's one of the better regular season games I've seen played in a long time. And they do everything. I mean, Alex mentioned it. They can play a little bully ball. Bates can beat you off the dribble at times. They've got Caleb Grill who shoots lights out. You mentioned their tempo last night. Like, that was the thing that shocked me is, look, I've seen Alabama because Illinois played them, and Illinois lost by, I think, 15, if I remember correctly. I think it was like 185. They did not play that fast. And Illinois likes to play with some tempo. They couldn't keep up with Alabama's tempo in that game. And Mizzou took it to them. And the other thing, like defensively, like I know they gave up their fair share of points last night. Like giving up 98 is nothing to just chalk over. But, I mean, defensively they forced turnovers. And that's the difference in that game last night. Because Alabama shot with them. They were hitting their shots from the field.
Bama played well. This was not a game having an off night and Mizzou beating them accordingly. They played a good game.
That was a heavyweight match. That was a heavyweight match.
It felt to me like watching it. People aren't going to like this because people hate the NBA. It felt like watching an NBA playoff game because both teams were just hitting crazy shots. Caleb Grill's step back three, you can't defend that, dude. There's no defense for the shots that he's making.
Sears hitting it from the Missouri logo, like
off of that steal where he ends up getting it again, and then they like have the rebound, and then he get some of these shots. Just you tip your cap and say, God bless you. There's 5 teams in the country that are making the shots that you could make last night on both sides of the ball. It's as much fun as I've had watching a basketball game all year long. You're not going to see a more well-played basketball game, maybe even in the tournament, than what you saw in that one. And 110-98 final score, 80 possessions overall in that game. At a college basketball game that's 40 minutes is crazy. It's absolutely nuts. They were flying up and down the court. Your best players were the best dudes. Mark Mitchell, Ant Robinson, Caleb Grill were all outstanding for Mizzou last night. I love this team. And maybe what I love most about them, they're really fun to watch, man. Whether it's stylistically what they do on the court, that's fun. But then post-game, did you guys watch that last night on SEC Network, the post-game stuff that they did?
I saw they're doing the silence. I don't even know what you'd call it.
The hush?
Yeah, hush. There you go. That's what it is.
There's something about this team, and it might be the best quality about Dennis Gates as a head coach, is his ability to bond a group together. Because the 2023 team, I guess it would have been, had this. They were really tight. I remember Noah Carter had like this vlog that they were following the team throughout. It was just a really fun group. Like on and off the court, they were fun to follow. And last year's team, they were terrible. They were just a bad basketball team, but they never felt like they were pulling in different directions. He seemed to keep them on the same page, which is not an easy thing to do when you're winless in conference play. And this year's team, dude, you can see it after the game. They have this bond that is really unique. Tamar Bates, I haven't looked at how many minutes he ended up getting last night. 25 minutes. This is a dude that at times this year has played 38 minutes. But last night he wasn't one of their best 5. And so what do? Hey, Tamar, we're going to sit you on the bench. We've got dudes that are playing better than you. Caleb Grill is going to play more minutes in the second half. Trent Pierce is one of their best players last night. He was awesome. He's going to play more than what he normally does. We're going to get our best dudes on the court, and in crunch time, Tamar, I'm sorry, that might not include you. They're all willing to accept whatever role it is that he's put them in. That's unique, man. You don't have that on a basketball team very often.
No, you don't. And it's why I do believe this team is going to be a threat when it comes to brackets this March Madness. I think with that win, and the expectation is, of course, to win out the rest of the way, you're potentially looking at a double bye as the top 2 seed. And that happens, you're putting yourself in a position where you don't have to worry about the upsets that we've seen in the past, where it's like, are you kidding me? Now, maybe it does happen.
You're talking about in the NCAA or in the SEC tournament?
SEC tournament.
Okay.
Yeah, SEC tournament. So, like, you go on that type of run, you put yourself in a position where it's going to be hard to doubt what Mizzou could do this in March Madness.
Last night's the game that if you weren't a believer, and I wouldn't even say I wasn't a believer, but last night's the game where you leave and you go, hey, the ceiling is top 4 or a Final Four caliber team.
Yeah.
Like Alabama,
this team can win the title.
I
know that sounds crazy. This team is capable of winning the national championship. If you can beat Florida on the road and you can beat Alabama at home, those are two of the top 5 to 7 teams in the country. You can beat anybody. I don't know that they will do it, but this team is capable of winning the national championship. Like, there is no more qualifiers we need to have on them. That is in their range of outcomes, and I haven't said that about Mizzou since 2012.
Yeah, and I think it comes down to their path, of course, once you get to that spot. But, yeah, you're right. I mean, it's in their range of outcomes. They get to the Final Four, and you have a couple upsets along the way, like Auburn goes home early, Bama or Florida goes home early. Yeah, you could be a team that has a legitimate shot to it. And watching them play last night, like I've said this all year long, I stuck with it, but I stuck with it more out of just being difficult. That Bama was the best team in the country even after their loss to Auburn. I mean, if I believe that, Missouri just kicked the living crap out of them, yeah, you better believe that I'm going to look at them and say, hey, they've got the ceiling to go on a legitimate run. And at this point, anything outside of an Elite Eight would be disappointing from Dennis Gates in that group.
I agree with.
Alex mentioned the double bye potential. The top 4 seeds in the SEC tournament end up with a double bye. As of today, they're 5th. They are tied with Texas A&M at 9-4, but Texas A&M does have that tiebreaker because A&M won head-to-head. By the way, the top 4 teams in the conference right now for the SEC ranked 1, 2, 4, and 7 in the country.
Wow. And Mizzou could be like top 10 as the 5th team.
The 6th team in the conference is ranked 6th in the country. This conference is absurd, man. It's why I said a couple of weeks ago, you will play more top 25 teams in your route to winning the SEC championship than you would on your path to winning the NCAA tournament. It's crazy what's potentially at play. But the reason I bring that up, you now have a tiebreaker on Alabama and on Florida, who are 2 and 3 in the conference, both at 10 and 3. You're at 9 and 4 in conference play. If you win out, there is a real chance that Missouri ends up with the 2 seed in the SEC tournament, which means you avoid Auburn up until that championship game potentially. Missouri could have a situation where they end up going to the SEC championship, and in that scenario, if they win out and go to the SEC championship, we could be talking about maybe the top 3 seed going into the tournament, or possibly, I think the ceiling is probably like one of the lowest 2 seeds. More likely, you're probably looking at a ceiling of a 3 seed for Missouri in the NCAA.
But regardless,
tournament.
you're talking about top 4.
Yes.
And that, to me, is the ideal spot for Mizzou to be in if you want to go on some type of run. With this roster, to have a top 4 spot, that's where you want to be.
Ideally, you want that 3. Yeah. That way you can avoid whoever it is that's going to be the 1 in your region until the Elite Eight.
Yeah, that's what you're hoping for. Get that 3 seed, but that requires them to win out based right now on KenPom. And for people that aren't familiar with it, it's a super nerdy advanced stats site that I like to use because that plays for me. They are projected to win all of their remaining games. They're projected to beat Arkansas, South Carolina, Vandy, Oklahoma, and Kentucky. As far as SEC schedules go, that's about as easy of a path as you can get to a 5-0 finish to the year. If they do that, they will finish this season with a 14-4 record in conference play and a 25-6 record overall. Pretty damn impressive coming off of an 0 year in conference play. Last thing that I wanted to get to here before we talk about Jim Montgomery. He was on the Last Minute Blues podcast yesterday with Alex. It was awesome. We'll get to that here in just a minute. Alex, after the game, technically during the game, Dennis Gates had a message for the fans.
Please do not rush the court.
Wow, Dennis Gates. Dennis Gates is on the mic saying, don't rush the court.
Costs a lot of money these days to a university.
Yeah.
We need that money to go to NIL. We don't need to be getting fines out there, but the safety. And I hope that becomes a normal thing. And when you are excited, which I credit our crowd for being, I just didn't want us to rush the court and get a fine. They showed up, and I thank our crowd. I wasn't trying to take any fun away from them. I hope they're ready for next week.
Boo! Took away the fun, Grandpa.
You hear how he said, too? He's like, look, we need that money for NIL.
Oh, and
player safety.
Yeah.
And player safety.
He realized in the moment, oh, wait, I should throw that one in there because that's the number 1 complaint about this.
Darn it.
I agreed with him.
I did too.
You were projected to win the game last night, man. The game against Kansas, that was a shock. Nobody saw that one coming.
That one's fair.
You had to rush the court. Like that is a more than deserving court storm. Last night wasn't that. Last night felt like it did against Kansas back in 2012 when Missouri beat them the final time at Mizzou Arena, that they were part of the Big 12 playing against one another. One of my favorite memories from college. I remember Missouri wins that game at the very end. It was a tight game throughout, and then there were some huge shots down the stretch by Marcus Dinman. They end up winning the game. Kim English went over to the student section as the clock is expiring and held everybody up and said, "Do not rush the court."
Yep.
This is what we expected to do. Do not rush the court. That is where Missouri finds itself right now. You don't rush the court against a top 5 team at home when you expect to win those games. It was actually a statement of how this team views itself that they didn't want fans to rush the court yesterday. If they didn't expect that, man, pay the $500,000 fine and let's move our separate ways. That was a fun as hell night at Mizzou Arena. Gabe DeArmond said last night on his post-game show, it's the best environment that he can remember at Mizzou Arena. Yes, I was a little upset that I wasn't there for it.
There's a reason that it was that. You weren't there.
That's the kind of thing that Dennis Gates is building at Mizzou. We'll talk a little bit more big picture about that coming up in the 12 o'clock hour. With Alex Ferrario and Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Brandon Kiley. It's BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line to get involved in the show. You can check us out on YouTube and be a part of the Graveyard Chat at youtube.com/101 ESPN STL. T-Bone, why'd you go with the Illini shirt today out of curiosity?
I just felt like we needed to be represented. I knew we were going to be talking about freaking Mizzou. I just decided.
You think they deserve to be represented right now?
No, we got a good football team, though.
Well, let's worry about that.
Almost building something.
Let's worry about that in August.
Better than Mizzou at football, at least.
I just wasn't sure if there was a specific reason that you went with the Illinois jacket today.
I just didn't want to see all that Mizzou.
You know who would let the fans storm the court? Brad Underwood.
We're not even shaking hands right now.
They got a flu outbreak on the team. All right, coming up next, Jim Montgomery was on with Alex and the guys for the Last Minute Blues podcast yesterday. He clearly has an idea of how he wants to develop these young players. You'll hear from Monty next year on 101 ESPN. Alongside Alex and T-Bone on BK. So Jim Montgomery stopped by the Last Minute Blues podcast yesterday with Alex, Donnie, and JR. It's a fantastic conversation. I listened to that earlier today. Alex, how'd you feel about it?
It was fun. It was a good time talking life with Jim Montgomery. We found out why he despises Provel cheese. So you can either hate listen or agree with him on that. We talked music a little bit, and then obviously we got into hockey. But it was great to catch up with Jim.
It was a good listen. People can find that conversation over on YouTube right now, youtube.com/101ESPN STL. You can also find it on your podcast feed, wherever you use your podcast. It's the Last Minute Blues podcast. It's always worth your time. Maybe this one more than most because it was Jim Montgomery spending the majority of the time talking. Wow. So highly recommend downloading that podcast. It's worth your time.
Slap.
God, he even in compliments he finds ways to insult you.
I do think it's a great podcast. It is worth your time. I'll listen to anything that Donnie and JR do. All right, Alex. So Jim Montgomery was on with you guys, and you asked him what I thought was a really good question because I was the one that gave you the question.
Oh wow! Wow! Boo! Boo! Unbelievable.
How do you go about developing young players and giving them more opportunities without the fear of, limiting what they have confidence-wise and overexposing them and putting them into situations where they can get themselves into trouble? It's one of the things that I love about coaching is that question, right? It's what I'm most curious about with Ollie Marmol this year. It's what I'm curious about with Jim Montgomery the rest of the way. How do you handle players like Broberg or Bolduc or Holloway and continuing to give them those opportunities with the hopes of not overexposing them? So here's what Jim Montgomery had to say about your very good question, Alex.
I'm a big believer if someone's playing well, you play them. And I think a great example of that is you said Dylan Holloway. I think before I got here, I believe his minutes were averaged just under 14. And I think since I've been here, because of how well he might have played 14 minutes the first 3 to 5 games, but he has become a 16 and a half to 17 minute player. And how that happens is their own confidence, giving them the opportunity to succeed. And then, them rewarding to the team, playing the right way, having second and third effort. Not everyone's going to be on top of their game. That's why it's really important when, say, someone who plays a lot of minutes, whether it's, Kyrou or Thomas, they're off their game and they're not playing 19 and a half minutes, say, that game. Well, someone like a Bolduc, or if Parayko's off his game, Broberg can, he's playing really well. He's going to go from 20 minutes to 22 and a half that night. Bolduc's going to go from 12 to 15. Someone needs to eat up those minutes. And then once they establish and they continue to do it over and over, now they move up, and that's where their minutes continue to grow, like Holloway's did. And the last thing I would say with that is you always have to be responsible to the team. So it doesn't matter who it is. If you're not playing the right way for the team, as a coach, you have to hold people accountable to that, whether you're your first line player or it's a young player or it's a veteran player, whatever the case may be.
He's got a reward system is what I thought when he was talking about this. And I think that's very impactful, specifically in hockey, because to me, with hockey players, at least being around them for the last 10 plus years, you can tell there's always an opportunity to prove somebody wrong. And maybe it's just the pro athlete, but there's always an opportunity of, hey, I didn't like the disrespect of not getting that playing time or that opportunity, so I got to go out and prove them wrong, rather than just kind of sit and pout about it. And what Jim Montgomery just explained there was the reward system. It's honestly what Drew Bannister did so well last year when he took over. We all remember that game against Tampa Bay where he sat Pavel Buchnevich in the third period and played some of the younger guys. But Dylan Holloway is the prototypical example of what Jim Montgomery's talking about. One, you've got to play the right way. And the right way to Jim Montgomery, we already know what the formula is with him. He's been here since November. You need a forecheck, you need to be responsible away from the puck, and you need to start going to the front of the net. That's how you get playing time. And look at Dylan Holloway. Why has he become a top 6 forward? Because he is responsible. But every single time they feel like somebody's had a step backwards, they promote that next player and say, you get your opportunity now. They've done it with Texier this season. They've done it a lot with Zach Bolduc this season. And I know people can get frustrated of Bolduc being in and out of the lineup, but the opportunities in the top 6 is kind of dangling that carrot in front of them. It's saying like, hey, this is here for you. And when you get up there, play the right way and you get more opportunities at that front. So I think when it comes to a standard that you're trying to promote with a lot of younger players that are going to be on this roster next season, this isn't going to be you're a top 10 pick, so you play in the top 6. This is you have to play the right way. Otherwise, you won't be playing in the top 6.
And it reminds me a lot of kind of what Ollie does, right? And I love the fact that coaches will do this. It's a little different because, I mean, you mentioned playing the right way. There's not really that in baseball, but
Always go hard.
You always run out a ground ball. But like Ollie does this with the bullpen arms a lot, right? Where it is, hey, we're going to bring in a reliever like Fernandez last year. He didn't start as an 8th inning setup man or 7th inning setup man.
Couldn't get into like the first 10 games of the season.
Yeah, I had trouble finding him a time to pitch. But he was kind of mop-up duty / middle inning relief, and you slowly start building that up. They get the confidence, and then you kind of, like you mentioned, dangle that carrot out there. Boom, all right, we'll give him one high leverage spot. Okay, he did well in that. We'll give him another. And you slowly build upon that to where then you get Fernandez that plays as your setup man, and now they're counting on him to be that this year. But it's the same for the St. Louis Blues, right? It's the same as, hey, you're playing pretty well tonight. Well, you know what? Why don't you go into the top 6? Or maybe we'll try it in a game or two. And if it works, we stick with it. And if it doesn't, then you can have a conversation as to, hey, here's what we're looking for. You're going to be on the 3rd line tonight. Now let's continue to build on this, and then we'll try again on this top 6. And you keep trying to build for these young players because they're not just going to come into the lineup and immediately get it right away. I mean, you know that's going to happen with like a Bolduc. We saw it last year when he was going through the growing pains under Bannister, and it's still going to happen because he's very young. So I like the fact when coaches do decide to go this route of, hey, we're not just going to put a guy in the top 6, or hey, we're not just going to put him in a spot where we don't really know if it's going to work, and it probably is advantageous to him. Let's start off a little bit slower. Let's put him in a spot where he should have success, and then we'll try and build him up into the top 6 or onto the top line.
Yeah, I heard Jamie and Carrie talking about this a couple of days ago now on the Fast Lane. They did the Ask the Athlete segment that they do. And they were talking about what they like in coaches, what works best for them with coaches. And they were like, I don't care if you yell. I don't care if you're somebody that's like mild-mannered. Specifically, Carrie brought up Tony Dungy, who has never raised his voice in his entire life. It's like, listen, Dungy was one of the best coaches I ever had, and the reason why is because he was honest. He didn't have to raise his voice to get his message across. Now, some coaches will, right? Like, Cowher was a screamer, and he was also one of the best coaches in the NFL while he was with the Pittsburgh Steelers. It's just about being honest. Like, be direct with me and don't BS me. Jamie brought up the idea of, hey, you know, if I'm having a good game, tell me I had a good game. But if I'm having a bad game, tell me I had a bad game. But don't BS me. Don't tell me I had a bad game and then don't give me any roses whenever I play the good game. You got to keep it straight with me. And that is something that it seems like Jim Montgomery does a really good job with, is making sure to keep everybody kind of level. Hey, if you're having a bad game, we're going to talk about it. Hey, Bolduc, here's what we need from you in order to get yourself back into the lineup. I remember Matthew Joseph. He was a healthy scratch for a little while. Mm-hmm. He went to Jim Montgomery and said, hey, I can help you on the PK. We're really struggling on the PK right now. I can be the guy that fixes this for you. And Monty said, you know, there were some discussions among the staff and there were some differences on whether or not that was actually the case. But they said, hey, it's broken right now. Let's try and see if we can fix it with him.
What the hell,
put him
why
back into the lineup, and it worked. I don't know if it's going to be the long-term fix, but it worked for a period of time. And that's the kind of thing you reward a guy for taking a chance on himself, or you reward a guy like Dylan Holloway who's doing all of the right things on the ice. I would like to see that a little bit more down the stretch with Zach Bolduc. He is somebody, there's been opportunities for him on that top line, but it feels like it's an opportunity and then it's stripped away, whether he plays well or not. They go back to kind of what's comfortable for them. I would like them to stretch it out a little bit more, to find out what Bolduc is capable of. Because I don't know if he's going to be a guy that's capable of being a top 6 winger long term. Maybe he is just a third liner. But I would like to find out. That to me is one of the priorities down the stretch of this season, is finding out exactly what he is. Is there more in there, or is he just a nice third line winger that's going to score 15 to 20 goals every season? Because if that's the case, cool. And then you can decide accordingly whether or not you value that as a part of your lineup long term. But that to me is the guy that I'm most curious about the rest of the way with this specific topic.
Well, and he kind of referenced him too during the podcast, but if you look at those last 2 games that he played, 14-28 against the Florida Panthers and then 14-20 against the Chicago Blackhawks. And I believe the Chicago game went to overtime, if I'm not mistaken. I think maybe both of them did, and you saw Zach Bolduc in overtime. That's the responsibility factor, and that's the rewards that Jim Montgomery is handing out. And that's what people want to see Dvorsky. They can't wait to see Snuggerud, and it's important to understand where Jim Montgomery's mindset is. This isn't a, hey, you were a first-round pick, so you're going to get a top 6 chance. Look at what Robert Thomas was with Craig Berube when he first got here. He was 18 years old, and he spent a lot of the time early in the season in the press box. Why? Because they wanted to have those conversations with him that said, look, you're playing well in this area, but you need to fix this area. And then as it got deeper into the season, he started portraying that on the ice, and they said, good, let's give him more responsibilities. That's what I expect with a Zach Bolduc. And by the end of this year, if they're here by next season, I would expect the same thing from Dvorsky and Snuggerud. You're not going to get the chance right away, but if you perform well in a third-line role, then you get amped up to the second-line role. And if you keep playing that consistently, we'll welcome being the top 6 forward.
If you guys missed any of that conversation with Jim Montgomery, all of it is really well worth your time, in all seriousness. I was joking around at the beginning, but Alex, you guys really did a really good job with that
with
interview.
your questions.
Not just on the hockey side of things, but I did feel like you learned a little bit more about Jim Montgomery, the person. You guys did a good job of bringing out that side of him as well. So check that out on the podcast page. You can check it out at 101ESPN.com, the YouTube page at youtube.com/101ESPNSTL, or if you just want to listen to the podcast, just whatever podcast app you use, search Last Minute Blues Podcast, and you'll be able to find that. All of the episodes are worth your time, especially this one with Jim Montgomery. If you guys want to get involved in the show, questions and answers is in 15 minutes. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service X line to get involved. But coming up next, is Masyn Winn already considered to be the face of the Cardinals franchise? We'll talk about that coming up here on 101 ESPN.
Tanner Hendricks here, the Sports Center update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. Tonight here on 101 ESPN, you can hear the Four Nations Championship game between Team Canada and Team USA, as well as pregame coverage starting at 6 o'clock with puck drop at 7. The Sports Center update is driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. See them at Londoff.com. Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
With Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. It's BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. So there's a really good piece up over on Cardinals.com earlier today, Alex, with one of my favorite players, Masyn Winn. And I thought it kind of got into the mindset of Masyn Winn leading into this season, and I love everything about it, frankly. He has his sights set on becoming the Cardinals' face of the franchise. And some of these quotes in here, whether it's from Masyn Winn or Ozzie Smith or Ollie Marmol, they kind of illuminate the type of personality that the Cardinals have with Masyn Winn. We've seen this firsthand. We've had him on the show. We've talked to him out of the clubhouse. Wynn's a good dude. All right, he said this to MLB.com. Quote, "Everybody wants to be the best version of themselves, and I want to be that guy around here for a long time. I want to be the shortstop in this organization, an all-star, multiple gold gloves, and I want to win a silver slugger at some point." He then continued later on in the article, his quote to him, his expectation or goal for this upcoming year is to steal 30 bags. On his mindset of how he deals with competition, quote, "I don't really feel pressure because it's the same game that I've been playing since I was 3 years old. I don't care who's on the mound. I want to face a guy like Aroldis Chapman in his prime. I would say growing up in Texas with a tough mom and a stepdad, that's where my confidence comes from and why I'm so comfortable in those specific settings." Quote that came from one of the best to ever do it, did it in this organization for a really long time, Ozzie Smith. Said he's the type of player that you're always looking to build around, and hopefully you can find 9 or 10 of them. And when they think the way that Winn does, you can build good chemistry and you can win. Masyn is really fun to watch. His development is continuing, and I'm seeing more of it already. That's always the goal, to get better, and he's done that, and I think he could have a really long and a very prosperous career. Ollie Marmol's quote in this, I think it was a really good article with a lot of good quotes. "I consider Masyn to be one of the most exciting players in the game right now. If you're a fan and you're watching the game, he impacts it in so many ways as he continues to develop and give himself more years. This is genuinely one of the most exciting players out there," end quote. Alex, I've made the comparison to Jimmy Rollins. I think that's the kind of impact that he can have on the field day to day. Really good defensively, can be a leadoff hitter for you if you really need him to be. Jimmy Rollins had a little bit more speed on the bases, but maybe that's something that you'll see implemented more in Masyn Winn's game. He said he wants to be the face of the franchise. Do you think he already is that?
I would say no. I don't think this team has a face of the franchise right now. And the closest they would have to it would either be Nolan Arenado since he's here or Wilson Contreras. And I don't think Wilson Contreras can be it because it hasn't been a whole lot of time that he's been here. And frankly, there's not been success. I don't view this team as having a face of the franchise. I think the next guy that can be it, though, is Masyn Winn. But for Masyn Winn to take that role, he's got to do what he did last year again, if not better. And to get to the level that what he's explaining, you need to see a continual growth in the offense. Because defensively, it's always going to be there. And I'm not saying defense can't make you the face of the franchise, but personally feel like baseball today is more about offense than defense. And if you've got a guy who is going to give you 10 to 12 home runs, but he's still getting on base enough, I don't know if people outside look at that as face of the franchise. I think you're talking about a guy that probably has to be in that Silver Slugger conversation / MVP conversation to get into that.
And I agree with that, but I don't know if that's the case here in this market.
I agree.
I think in this market, because it's still kind of an old school mindset of like people like we bring up stuff all the time like OPS and OPS plus, and we'll see texts that are like, well, what's his batting average, right? And that's old school mindset. And I'm not saying that's wrong thinking, but that is more of the old school, not modern baseball. And I think Winn can potentially, I don't know if he's there yet as face of the franchise. I think it's probably right now either him or Arenado kind of by default, but I think he's the guy that can play the style that Cardinals fans would reminisce about from when it's in the 80s, to where he's going to hit for a high average. Maybe he doesn't end up adding power. Maybe he does. But then he gets on base. He can create some havoc by stealing bases, and he's going to play Gold Glove level defense. We've seen his range. Like, he's got incredible range up the middle, which will remind fans of Ozzie Smith, who was quoted in that article.
So can I stick with that for a second before
Sure.
you continue along? I would say Ozzie was the face of the 80s Cardinals.
Yeah.
And Ozzie was a guy that in his entire major league career, which was 19 seasons, he was above league average offensively exactly 4 times. You know how many times he slugged above 400 in his career?
Oh, it had to be like once.
0. He never did it.
Dang it, I almost said 0.
Even his on-base percentage, like most of his career, he was below 350, which is, none of this is to like take shots at Ozzie. I want to make that very clear. Ozzie was a spectacular baseball player. He just went about it in a different way than some of the other great players that we've seen. And he was the face of the franchise for different reasons. He was fast. He was a threat on the base paths. He was an unbelievable defensive player. And he got on base via the batting average. Like, that's how he lifted his on-base percentage. He wasn't a guy that was walking, 100, 200 times in a year. He never walked more than 90 times in any individual season. He's just a really good hitter, knew how to hit, knew when to do certain things with the bat. Like, he just a good player. Hit a bunch of doubles. That's what Masyn Winn can be. Now, I'm not saying he's going to be the next Ozzie Smith. That's unbelievably high praise for anybody to put out there. Ozzie's one of the best to ever do it. But Masyn can be a hell of a baseball player, and I believe the face of this franchise without becoming, Bobby Witt Jr. when it comes to what he's doing offensively. I think he is that guy. I think the Cardinals have, based on this offseason, transitioned. I'll use their term, not whether it was the beginning of the season, but what it is now. I think they have transitioned into this young core. And if you're trying to prop somebody up to be that guy, it can't be Walker. It can't be Nolan Gorman. It's probably one of Brendan Donovan or Masyn Winn. And Brendan Donovan's a glue guy. I think he could be a leader of the clubhouse. That's different than being the face of the franchise publicly. I think Masyn Winn has all of the qualities that are required to be a face of the franchise. So to me, I think he is already that guy. Like the media obligations, I think he's going to be one of the guys that's most front and center in that regard.
Oh, poor him.
And I also think playing style and the ability on the field, it speaks to this fan base. He was built in a lab for this fan base, dude. Super confident, plays the right position, plays the game the quote-unquote right way, defensively is remarkable, and he busts his ass every time that he gets onto the field. So I think he is that guy already.
Here's my only question with that, and I'm not saying that it's incorrect. I'm just asking if this team continues to struggle because they don't have that superstar MVP bat that becomes the guy that lifts everyone up. If Masyn Winn continues doing this, but the team still continues to struggle, how much does that matter to people? Like, yes, he might be the face of the franchise, but you might be a franchise that's just continuously losing because you don't have that guy that's big bat.
So this is where it gets interesting because this fan base is different than the one that I grew up with. I grew up in a city where the baseball team stunk. Like, they were just terrible. And the face of the franchise for most of my childhood is a guy that I would imagine a lot of Cardinals fans only know because of his brother. It was Mike Sweeney. Now, Mike Sweeney, if you look back at his baseball card, you'd look at it and you'd be like, man, that was a pretty good player. But he was completely forgettable because he played for a terrible Royals team for a decade, basically. For almost the entirety of his career was spent in my hometown playing for bad teams. Carlos Beltran, though, that guy was good, and he left. Jermaine Dye, that guy was good. Went on to win a World Series MVP for the White Sox. He left. Who else was there? Jermaine Dye, Carlos Beltran, and...
There's a lot of them, buddy.
The other... Johnny Damon. Johnny Damon went on to play elsewhere, won a World... You see a theme here? These guys all ended up going on to win a World Series.
Your childhood sucked.
The reason I bring that up, Alex, for this specific conversation, my childhood was great, but my childhood watching baseball was really horrific.
Sorry, not a personal shot. Your childhood with sports sucked.
No, it's fair. We can talk about the other stuff later on. There's some issues there.
I wasn't bringing that up, man. We don't need to go there.
That's the junk drawer conversation.
Jeez, no.
That's your dad pod.
That's your theology podcast.
Oh, yeah.
We've got a lot of podcasts coming up. Speaking of which, a lot of podcasts coming up. So, how can he become the face of the franchise, and does it work if this team is not good? I think it can work, but I don't think anybody cares. And that's where there is a little bit of a divide in how he's viewed. He will not be remembered fondly as much because the team isn't having the success, and ultimately the legends here in St. Louis are the ones that hoisted that trophy overhead.
Yeah.
And if you don't do that, you can't be beloved. You can be appreciated, but you will not be beloved. A guy that I would say this about is like, you look back at Paul Goldschmidt's career.
That's what I was just thinking in my head.
He's appreciated among Cardinals fans, but he never won it.
Yeah.
And so a guy like David Freese, who was back at camp yesterday, he's more beloved than Paul Goldschmidt, even though Goldie is clearly and obviously a better player over the long term. Again, no shot at David Freese. Just David Freese would tell you the same thing. Goldie was better than me. But in terms of their appreciation here in this fan base, it's different, man. That October run means everything here. And if Masyn doesn't have that, he can't reach us.
And the only reason I brought that up was because I was thinking, like, if I were to ask you or Cardinals fans, because we were young at this time, who was the face of the Cardinals in the 90s? Because they went 10 years with making the playoffs once.
Prior to the McGuire era.
And that's what I was going to say. McGuire probably would be the answer for a lot of people, but why? Because of
He's chasing history.
Exactly.
So that changes it.
And I don't know if this team's going to be in a 10-year where they make the playoffs once. Frankly, I really pray that they don't, because I'd like to see some winning baseball. But for Masyn Winn, yes, you may be the face of the franchise for the style that wins over Cardinals fans, but how much does that matter? Like that 10-year stretch in the 90s.
It's interesting because the answer might still be Ozzie.
Yeah.
But not in the same way that we're thinking about. Like, Ozzie was here in the 90s on some of those bad teams. Obviously, it didn't end super well, but, like, he was still the face of the franchise. He had already won a World Series here.
Yeah.
And that's
he
where
was
it
kind of
gets
the Yachty over these last few years, where it was like, he's
or
the face.
Waino's a perfect example of that, where Waino's still here, and you have those fond memories when he's on the mound of yesteryear. It's different when you're a young player that is growing up in that. And that's where I go to, like, Ray Langford, who was a really good player in his time here in St. Louis, a really good player. I think it's misremembered or underappreciated for how good he was here in St. Louis, but the teams weren't good around him. And so you don't really have a whole lot of conversations about Ray Langford because the era was forgettable. That's what I hope doesn't happen to Masyn Winn, because Masyn Winn could have a really good career, and he has a Jimmy Rollins-esque career without the MVP, let's say. That's forgettable if you don't also have the team success. So I do think he's kind of taken over as that leader and the face of the franchise, but I think you make a good point, Alex. How much does any of that matter if you're not able to have the team success long term?
Yeah.
He's Alex Ferrario. That's Tanner Hendrickson, and I'm Brandon Kiley. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service X line to get involved in the show. Questions and answers coming up next here on 101 ESPN. Hey, alongside Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for questions and answers. If you guys have any questions, get them in right now on the Air Comfort Service text line. From the 636, guys, does T-Bone have a cry space picked out with Kerry Davis when Illinois doesn't even make it to the NCAA tournament?
I would only like to refer to Tanner on this cry space question because I will not refer to Kerry as having a cry space.
Yeah, I don't get the sense Kerry would be that emotional.
No, well, not over Illinois. Kerry, I'm sure has emotions.
I think Kerry told me. I talked to him either yesterday or 2 days ago, but right before their show when we kind of cross over, And he's like, I went on a rant the other day about that Illini team because they just keep shooting three. I was like, hell yeah, Kerry, say it with your chest.
Keep fighting the good fight.
I think both me and Kerry have now realized that this team just kind of sucks. So there's no need to cry. Like last year, if Illinois, that team with Shannon, Domask, they ran into a buzzsaw on UConn. But, if that team would have lost in the first or second round, yeah, I would have cried. I may have had to call him sick the next day.
What was the last sports moment that you cried at?
Me?
Yeah.
Are you saying that because I'm, a not emotional person?
No, I'm just saying, the last sports, because I have one. I'm just curious what you guys have. Right? Yeah. Mine's the Blues when they were kicked out of that President's Trophy season when they lost to, I think it was San Jose.
I'm not that kind of an emotional guy.
I was 11, though, so.
I don't get, sad or happy cry.
Yeah, I don't either. I'm trying to think if I have one.
My happy cry was when my dad texted, when I was in Boston when they won the cup, my dad texted me a video of him watching them celebrate, and he started tearing up, so that broke me a little bit.
I was excited when the Chiefs won the Super Bowl, but it's not, I don't know.
Yours was when Patrick Mahomes was drafted. I've seen the video, buddy.
Yeah, that was, I leaped into another guy's arms.
It's not uncommon.
No, something I do on the show as well, behind the scenes. I leaped into Alex's arms this morning celebrating Mizzou's victory.
That's right. It was like Dirty Dancing. I was Patrick Swayze, though.
If Mizzou wins the Natty, I'm going to do that when we get into the...
We're going to Dirty Dancing?
Absolutely.
I can do it, buddy.
I
think I got you.
That'll be
I
great
can't
on
think of
social
anything that I got
media.
that emotional about.
Yeah.
I think I may have shed some tears, if I remember correctly, when the Rams won the Super Bowl recently.
I think you're talking about 2001. I was like, dude, you were in the womb.
Well, that's the thing. Is my whole childhood, growing up, I don't remember 01. I don't remember the 99 Super Bowl run because I was a baby. My whole childhood, the Rams sucked. So, and then they left. Well, that was crying because they left town. That one I got emotional
I was just thinking,
over,
play to your audience,
The most exciting one was probably when they did win a Super Bowl because I did stick loyal. I know, I suck, but I did stick loyal when they went to L.A., and that's the first time that I remember the football team being really good and winning something meaningful.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. What was the event, sports-wise, that broke you the most? Whether you became emotional or not, but the event that you felt legitimately broken inside because of.
I know mine.
Illinois losing to Loyola Chicago in the tournament broke me.
Mine was the 2016 Western Conference Final because I'm like, this team's never winning a Stanley Cup. When they lost and Backus was crying in the locker room, I'm like, this team's never going to win the Stanley Cup. They lost to San Jose.
Yeah, that's right.
Yep. I said, this team's never going to win the Stanley Cup.
Mine was Mizzou basketball against Norfolk State.
Yeah, that one.
That one was a crier. I was at Ronnie's watching it on the big screen when that happened.
I did not believe they were going to lose until they finally missed the final shot. It's the first moment where I even considered the possibility that they would actually lose that basketball game. Had zero belief that would happen. The other one was also in college, 2013, Mizzou going to the SEC championship game, and they just could not stop Trey Mason. Couldn't stop him. No ability. They went to a 3-3-5. Trey Mason just all day long. I think he finished 250 rushing yards. It was insane. But that would be the other one for me.
Another one for me is probably, I think it was the 2015 Cardinals when they lost to the Cubs in the wild card round.
That was rough.
Because, I knew a bunch of my buddies back, because I was in either high school or middle school when that happened, and a bunch of my buddies back home, because my hometown's basically a 50-50 split of Cubs and Cardinals fans.
Mizzou and Kansas.
Yeah, so I had a bunch of Cubs fans, and I hate the Cubs. I still hate the Cubs. And watching them win the World Series, first off, sucked. But then when they beat us in that playoff round, and I had to go to school the next day, and they kicked the crap out of the 100-win team in the Cardinals, and the Cardinals didn't even look competitive. That one did sting a lot because I thought that 2015 team could win the World Series.
All right, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for questions and answers. If you guys have any questions, get them in on the text line right now. From the 314, guys, have you already, or are you planning to put some money on Mizzou to win the Natty title this year? I texted you guys last night. That is in my plans.
You'd be stupid not to put money on it.
As a fan, I would feel so dumb if this team wins the national championship and I didn't profit off
What were their odds? when you put money on it?
Yeah, I haven't done it yet, but 40-1. I got to go over to the Illinois side.
You'd be dumb not to put money on it.
I don't know if they've changed. They were 66-1 at the start of the day yesterday. They've obviously
Imagine if you would have done
that.
that at the beginning of the season.
Oh, dude. I'm not even sure they were on the board.
You probably not. You know what? What the hell? I'd say you do it. When BK sent that text last night, my first rank was
They're
like,
now at 32-1 odds now.
When BK sent that text last night, my immediate reaction was like, okay, let's calm down. But then as I sit here thinking about it, I remember when I went to Vegas for my 22nd birthday, I put money on the Cardinals to win the World Series. And at that point, they were like 10 and a half games out. It was the 2021 season. It was before they went on their run. And I said, screw it. I'll throw money on them. I threw money on the Rams to win it. I threw money on the Blues. And the Rams ended up winning the Super Bowl that year. So it worked out.
I'm actually upset with myself. I didn't put money on the Blues to win the Cup when they did back in 19.
See?
And then, of course, it's famous now. The guy that actually did it won, what was it, like 6 digits or something? I'm so pissed off at myself.
They do have odds for the Final Four as well. Mizzou is plus 550, so 5.5-1 to make it to the Final Four. I actually like that bet probably a little better than to win the title bet. Mizzou could make it to the Final Four this year. That's very much in play. I mean, they've already beat Alabama, who has the 4th best odds to make it to the Final Four, and beat Florida, who has the 5th best odds to make it to the Final Four, and had every opportunity to beat Tennessee, who has the 7th best odds to make it to the Final Four in Vegas right now. So, yeah, it's a good basketball team, man.
$100. You want to pool it all together? 300?
Let's do it. Alongside Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. Coming up in 15 minutes, we'll do Believe It or Not. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. If you guys have a scenario, we will tell you if we are believing it or not, coming up at 12:15. But next, Dennis Gates has proven himself right now to be one of the best coaches in the country, in my opinion. We'll tell you how and what are the lessons that can be learned from the way that Missouri built this roster. We'll talk about it next year on BK and Ferrario. Alongside Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. So we've got a little bit of news to pass along. First, the small one. Matt Moore, reliever, is going to be headed to the Boston Red Sox. He's on a minor league deal with a camp invite. He wasn't very good last year, 5 ERA, but I've always felt like Matt Moore is a little bit of an underappreciated pitcher. So he's going to the Red Sox on a minor league deal. The bigger news, though, San Antonio Spurs star Victor Wembanyama, one of the best players in the NBA, and one of the rising stars inside of the league. He's expected to miss the remainder of this season with deep vein thrombosis, which is apparently some kind of a blood clot in his shoulder. So hopefully this is something that he's going to be able to deal with. But my guess is, we've seen this before. I think it was Chris Bosh who ended up having to, I believe, retire because of blood clots. But it became an issue for him with traveling because you have to be on blood thinners. So when you're on blood thinners, you can't get on a plane. So I'm guessing that's probably part of what's going on here. I'm certainly not a doctor, but hopefully he's okay long-term, and it doesn't do to his career what it ended up doing to Chris Bosh's career. But that's big news in the NBA. Victor Wembanyama is legitimately one of the best players in the league already, and he's, 22 years old.
Yeah, anytime it's not like a break or a muscle tear and it's something like this, that's really scary in terms of threatening of never seeing the guy play again, which I don't think is going to be the case, but yikes.
Yeah, a Twitter doctor, which you know is always a valuable resource, says, terrible news for Victor, means he has a blood clot. It'll need to be on blood thinners for at least 3 months. Always important that they prevent the clot from traveling anywhere. This is what derailed the career of Chris. Okay, so he just told you what I told you.
Did you just read your tweet?
Twitter doctor right underneath Google doctor. It's a nice thing.
There you go.
That Google doctor thing, that'll get you.
Yeah.
Another piece of news, Alex, this comes from Frank Saravalli. We're eventually going to talk about Dennis Gates, I promise. Says the Flames are expected to place Tyson Barrie on waivers at 2 o'clock today. Any interest there?
No.
Okay, cool. Moving along. Dennis Gates has proven himself to be one of the best coaches in the country.
33-year-old right-handed defenseman. Are you kidding me? No, we're good. We got plenty of those.
Cool. Just making sure that everybody's on the same page.
We're going to trade him.
Last year was terrible. Missouri went 8-24, did not win a single conference game, and a lot of people had real, I think, fair questions about whether or not Dennis Gates, was this a one-hit wonder, or is this a guy that's actually going to be able to do something for us long-term? Well, it turns out he's a really good coach, and his 2 best players got hurt. T-Bone, you got to see the John Tonji experience over the weekend with Wisconsin. What did you think of that?
That guy's a stud.
He's pretty good, right?
Yeah, if they had him last year, they're definitely going to win at least a basketball game.
You watched Caleb Grill last night?
Oh, yeah.
Is he pretty good?
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
those guys
Mizzou
played
would have been pretty good
combined
last
like
year.
100 minutes on the season. They played, I think it was 12 games combined between the 2 of them, but most of those games, they barely played. They were just hurt all year long. So, yeah, when your 2 best players are not available to you, things are going to go awry. Going over is rough. That's unforgivable, but, it is what it is. He has now proven himself to be a more than capable coach, and he said he wants to be at Missouri for the next 20 years. Hopefully he stays to that tune. Alex, what lessons are there, if any, on what we've seen from Dennis Gates in his first 3 years at Mizzou?
Patience.
That's what I was getting at.
I mean, sorry to cut you off, but that's
sure.
the first thing that comes to mind for me is patience, because last year I think everyone was like, oh, this guy's bad, get rid of him, move on. And I mean, I don't know, I can't remember going back to like the first 2 years of Eli Drinkwitz if it was immediately like, this is bad.
It's not. He was 500 for his first 3 years.
Yeah, so, and I mean, coming off of what Barry Odom was, it's like, just give us something different. But I mean, especially in basketball, like you can change it pretty quick. And I mean, just look at the success that he had in one off season of bringing in a couple of players, specifically Mark Mitchell, and realizing, I think he said it yesterday in his post-game press conference, it's like, look, this is a guy that we saw potential in, and it was just a matter of getting him back to potential. Sometimes you have to find, specifically now in college sports, athletes that aren't having success in certain areas and just give them a shot. Give them a shot to rebuild confidence. And if you've got the right coach, that seemingly Dennis Gates is a great players coach, that guys love working with them, and then most importantly, he instills that confidence to get the best out of them. Man, you got to be patient, because 1 year you could work that transfer portal like a boss and come away with 3 studs to change your team from a can't win a game in the SEC to now being one of the top 4 teams in the SEC.
I think there's something to be learned from the way that Gates has recruited to his style of play. Like, you think of the teams now, again, you have the oddball of the 0-18, but you think back to the first team with like Kobe Brown, and you think about this team. There were 2 things that they had in common. One is, hey, we're not afraid to let you shoot the 3-point shot, and they had guys that could do it. Caleb Grill this year, Kobe Bryant did it he did it in the 2 years or 3 years ago team, and then, hey, we're going to have super active hands defensively, and we're going to make it a living nightmare. Now, the team 3 years ago really struggled to rebound, which was their Achilles heel. But that's been his identity of what he's been trying to build when he's been at Mizzou. It's we're going to get guys that can shoot the three-point shot, and we're also going to get guys that have active hands and that are very good at creating turnovers and giving us extra possessions, which then allows us to go on the run offensively. He stuck to that. And the reason I bring that up, and I'm not saying Brad Underwood's done a bad job at Illinois. I mean, he's going to get them to another tournament. But when I think of Brad Underwood, he keeps evolving stylistically. And I don't know if he's going to find the consistency potentially of what Gates could build at Missouri because of that. Because you think back to Underwood's first teams. It was, hey, we're going to play bully ball with Kofi Coburn. And then it was, hey, we're going to become more of a kind of 4-5 out team with Damasco back you down, with Shannon being kind of a slasher. And then you think of this team, and it's kind of, he doesn't want it to be this, but it's three-point centric. We're going to let a bunch of three-pointers fly, and hopefully we make them. If we don't, we'll try and get the rebound. He's gone through a bunch of different evolutions as how he's been building the program. Meanwhile, for Dennis Gates here in the first 2 years, I think there's something to say about, hey, this is what I want our team to be, and this is what I'm going to go look for when I'm on the recruiting trail.
He is steadfast in what he wants the team to be.
Yeah.
He wants length. He wants shooting. He wants to play fast. And he wants guys with confidence. Like I will never forget this quote. It came from Eric Bieniemy when he was talking about Patrick Mahomes, and he said he has a competitive arrogance about him, where he's competitive, but there's almost like it's confidence veering on arrogance is the way that he described Patrick Mahomes, and it makes sense. You think about some of the stuff that Mahomes tries to do on the field. Like, yeah, that applies to him, I would say. I think the same thing is true for some of what Missouri does on the basketball court. Like Caleb Grill, some of the shots that he takes, it's like, no. Oh, yeah. For you, that's a good shot. For 99% of human beings, that was a terrible shot. Some of the passes that they made last night, and this has been the case all season long. T-Bone, as somebody that doesn't watch as much Illinois or as much Mizzou, and you watch a lot of Illinois, dude, the full-length court passes that you saw on display last night, there were like 3 or 4 of them.
Caleb Grill was awesome in the passing game last night.
Even on that inbound where he threw it over the top to Tamar Bates, like as time is starting to expire in the game and you really needed a bucket in that moment to continue to increase the lead, they just try stuff on the court. And I think he empowers players in a way that Mark Mitchell's a good example of this. And Alex, I think you were the one that mentioned this. Mark Mitchell's a bad shooter. He shoots 24% from 3 this year. He's really bad at it, and he shouldn't shoot them. But Mark Mitchell believes in his abilities, for better or for worse, and so he shoots them occasionally. And I think there's something to that where it's like, hey, man, go ahead and take that shot. I'll live with it. I'm not going to take you out of the game because you took a bad shot and it didn't go down. Last night he made one of his threes. It's the worst thing that could have happened to Mizzou, but he did make one. It was the first one,
which was the worst thing that could happen.
But
Mark Mitchell's like, I got it tonight, boys.
When you have that kind of faith from your coach, it's kind of like the Cardinals in yesteryear with Mike Matheny, where he's pulling Colton Wong out of the game after he goes 0 for 3, and Colton Wong's like, man, I'm pressing. I got to get a hit here. Randall Gritchick, same thing. Mizzou's players just play free. They just go out there and they say, hey, I'm going to play my game, and we'll see if that works tonight.
And to me, it's because they have a style that they know they're going to play as a team, and it allows the flexibility to the players. Because if you don't have a system in place and you allow freedom, it becomes chaos, because you've got 5 different guys trying to do 5 different things, and there's no mentality, there's no camaraderie on the court. At least in that game against Alabama last night, you had 5 different skill sets at once, but they all kind of came together with speed and size underneath the basket that put a hurt on Alabama.
And I think that's, like you mentioned, confidence from a player perspective of, hey, like it's okay for me to shoot. This coach isn't going to pull me if I don't do it. I also think it's confidence in teammates, right? It's,
sure.
Hey, Mark Mitchell, for example. I'm not a great three-point shooter, but I'm open. I'm going to take this shot. But it's not the end of the world if I miss this, because I've got confidence that my guys are going to pick me up on our next possession, whether that's on the defensive end of the floor or, hey, we're going to make up for it because Caleb Grill's going to drill a 3 the next time I get the ball down on the other end. And I think that's super important as well.
We've got a hater on the text line. This comes from a 314.
Illinois going to the NIT
so
guy?
Coach Gates wants great players. What coach doesn't, guys? Talk about his inability to coach guys up. Almost anybody could coach great players. I think that's just like missing the forest through the trees. Yes, every coach wants great players. That's what made Bill Self great. And then when everybody else could pay their players the way that Bill Self was able to pay his players previously, before the NIL was part of this,
that was
suddenly,
an unnecessary shot at Kansas.
Kansas looks a little different, don't they? The talent gap doesn't quite look as big as it once did with old Jayhawks over there. But anyways, I digress.
Nice.
Mark Mitchell wasn't this player at Duke. He wasn't. Mark Mitchell was solid. But this is a guy that was a 5-star recruit coming out of high school. He went to Duke, became a role player. He was not empowered the way that he has been at Missouri, and he didn't look like the player that he's become at Missouri. That's not a shot at Duke. It's not a problem with them. It's the reality of where he fit into their plans. Sometimes that happens. But he gets to Mizzou, he's given this opportunity, and he's run with it. Dude, Tamar Bates was run out of Indiana. He didn't fit. They weren't a very good team. It wasn't working for him there. He leaves, comes to Mizzou, and has become, arguably their most consistent player this season. That's coaching. Ant Robinson, almost unplayable at times last year. Even this year, has gone through some really rough spurts where he cannot stop fouling the opposition. Last night, once again, ran into a little bit of foul trouble. Ant Robinson at times last night, though, was the best player on the basketball court. That's coaching. Caleb Grill, decent player at Iowa State. Had some troubles on the court, said something he says that he regrets, and ended up at UNLV briefly, back at Iowa State briefly, got booted off the team, and has come back to Mizzou, went through an injury, and this year looks like one of the best shooters in America. Coaching. So whether it's on the court, off the court, whatever, I think he's done a pretty damn good job of coaching these guys up. You have to look no further than Kobe Brown from year one. Guy was not a good shooter his entire career. Coach Gates gets there. Year one becomes an NBA player because he develops a three-point shot. So I get it if you're not as high on Dennis Gates as maybe I am. That's fair. We can disagree on how good of a coach he is. But to say that he hasn't coached up any of these guys is just denying the existence of what is clearly out there. There's evidence that will go directly against that belief. All right, coming up next, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for Believe It or Not here in BK and Ferrario. 143999646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for Believe It or Not. T-Bone?
I don't want to talk about it.
This is embarrassing.
T-Bone? What happened?
We were talking about some other ish during the commercial break.
Oh, so that means you could just check out of doing everything else?
Well, BK was pestering me about stuff. I just got to keep him in line. So I was trying to do that, and then I totally slipped my mind that it's Believe It or Not. But guess what, guys?
This is trash. I don't even want to be a part of this right now. I don't even want to be a part of this.
Bradford wouldn't give up. Okay?
Bradford would not give up. Bradford would sing his little heart out.
And it's like the best song going right now still.
False.
Sing it, fellas. Believe it or not, I'm walking on air. I never thought I could feel so
Free. We're flying away on a wing and a prayer. Who could it be?
Believe it or not, it's just me.
Man, for the failure that you had at the beginning.
Still.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for Believe It or Not. You guys give us a scenario. We will tell you if we are believing it or not here on BK and Ferrario. All right, Alex, believe it or not, this year Masyn Winn will steal at least 30 bags. I know we did something similar yesterday, but now that he has said that his stated goal this season is to have at least 30 bags, believe it or not, Masyn Winn will finish with at least 30 stolen bases this year.
Oh boy. I'm gonna say not believe this. As much as I think his mindset is there, I don't know if it actually comes to fruition in terms of opportunities on the base paths where you're hitting, injury. I'm not sure that you're going to get there, because as much as we've wanted to see the run baby run, just like the slug baby slug, there has been some hesitancy in the past of this team kind of unleashing the guys on the base path. So I'm going to say not believe it.
There were 17 players last year in Major League Baseball that had at least 30 stolen bases.
Wow.
Lane Thomas was one of them, by the way.
I said we should trade for him.
Me too. Somebody doesn't like Lane Thomas.
Was he really?
Yeah, 32 of them.
He was a stud last year, man, and he crushed left-handed pitching, and so we went with a freaking reunion with Tommy Pham. We got rid of
him for a week.
T-Bone, what was his batting average last year?
Who, Lane Thomas? I mean, I don't like batting average, but
he goes right to batting average.
248.
237.
I say I figured it was low, but he hit. What was a slug?
He was a below league average hitter by the end.
Yeah, whatever.
He was really good against lefties, though. Genuinely excellent.
Yeah, he's carved out a role for himself like Randall Grichuk has, which is platoon bat, can crush lefties. I'm not going to believe it. I'm still skeptical he gets to 30. I think he's going to be more in the 20 to 25 range.
Alex?
Yeah,
I'm going to believe it. I'm all in on Masyn Winn. You guys know that.
No, you're thinking 50 stolen bags.
I'm here for it. Let's do it.
Believe it or not, boys, Jordan Binnington doesn't allow more than one goal tonight.
I'm not going to believe this. There's just too much talent on that U.S. side. I think they allow at least 2 goals. I heard earlier today a couple of different people. I think Robert Thomas mentioned he thinks it's going to be a low-scoring affair,
I do
3-1, 2-1, something like that. I don't feel that way. I think this game's going to be 4-3 in one way or another. I think USA ends up coming out on top. A 4-3 feels right.
I think it's a 3-1 final score, and I believe it's going to be Team USA, and it's a 2-1 with an empty netter. I'm actually starting to get a little skeptical with Team USA, because now they don't have Charlie McAvoy. Kachucks aren't fully healthy. Matthews isn't fully healthy. They don't have Quinn Hughes. That defense has Jake Sanderson, who has played 1 game in this tournament, playing in the top pair. So I'm a little nervous for Team USA.
I'm actually going to believe this. I think Benner's going to be awesome tonight. I mean, he was pretty good in that game when they met in the round robin. You and Wierenski.
No, it's Paul Wierenski. It's his brother.
But Binnington was good in the round robin game. I know he gave up 2 goals. If you take away the one, like, oh, what the hell was that?
Yeah.
Outside that, he was fantastic. I don't think he gives up a soft one tonight. I think Canada wins this one 3-1, so I'm going to say believe it.
It's kind of the way I'm leaning as well. Like a 2-1 final score, and I feel like it's one way or the other, and then the empty netter makes it 3-1.
Steve-On?
We talked earlier, guys, about Masyn Winn, face of the franchise, and you were reading through some of his quotes, and it reminded me of Victor Scott last year when he had brought up the idea of, like, hey, I'm going to be what fans want. I think he mentioned Vince Coleman and using his speed. Believe it or not, if Masyn Winn doesn't become the face of the franchise, Victor Scott's the next one in line.
Not. Jordan Walker's next in line.
I'd agree with that.
And if I'm being honest, this is not a long-term outlook, but the next in line would be similar to what it was with Shin coming after Ryan O'Reilly. It's probably Wilson Contreras, if we're being honest. Because Wilson Contreras is a guy who has the production to back up the talk and wanted to be here, like chose to stay in St. Louis. And if he goes out there and just mashes this year, I think he's the next guy in line to become that player. But beyond that, it's Walker for me, probably Donovan after that. I think Victor Scott is pretty low on that list. And I like Victor Scott. I just don't know that that's necessarily in his future for the Cardinals.
Not?
No, I think it would be Jordan Walker, and then beyond Jordan Walker, I think you're talking like a J.J. Weatherholt or something or Quinn Matthews. I don't think you're going to get to a point where Victor Scott's a perfect complementary piece. Victor Scott's not a face of the franchise.
I think so too.
I tend to agree. I probably would have him third on my list. And it's hard, I get what you're saying with
Just
Contreras.
because of the style.
Yeah, the style for Scott. And I get what you're saying with Contreras. Problem is I don't know how long he's here beyond his contract.
Yeah.
Scott, he should have 6 years with the Cardinals.
I think if it was Scott, to your point on this, I think it's more of a team identity. Like the 80s Cardinals, I think Ozzie people would say would be the face of the franchise, but really it was the running Redbirds. It was the identity of the team. And so I do think there's the potential, at least with the way that they want to play, where that becomes an identity for them, and therefore more so than Victor Scott being the guy. It's just, hey, the Cardinals are known for speed, and Scott is the best version of that. So I think that's the way that it happens for him, probably.
Yeah, I'd agree with it. And I agree Walker's probably second just because of his ceiling as what we've talked about. But I could see where Scott's probably third on that list. Matthews, you mentioned him. It's hard for pitchers to become face of the franchise unless they're just dominant. You think across baseball, guys that have done that, you're talking Kershaw when he was with the Dodgers. You're talking Skeens now with the Pirates. You have to be the best pitcher in all of baseball to get that accomplishment.
All right, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for Believe It or Not from the 314. Guys, believe it or not, Nolan Arenado has a comeback season this year and finishes the season leading the team in RBI. Nolan Arenado leads the team in ribbies this year.
I'm going to say believe it.
I'm going to believe it as well. I think he ends up being the cleanup hitter. The one guy that gives me pause on this would be Contreras.
That's who I was as well, but I think the spot Arenado's going to be hitting in, you have a better opportunity to get runners in rather than Contreras, where you might only have one guy on.
He's a high average guy. He's going to come up with a lot of people on because you're probably going to have Nootbaar and or Donovan in front of him. Contreras potentially batting in front of him as well. So you're just going to have a ton of opportunities. As long as he's average this year, I think he gets a decent amount of ribbies.
Yeah, I'm not going to believe this. I mean, everything that you just said there, he tallied 71 RBIs last year, and that could be the same conversation.
Second on the team, right, behind Burleson?
I think that's right. I just pulled up Arenado's stats, but I'm not going to believe. I don't think he's capable of a bounce back anymore at this point in his career. I mean, he's going to be 34. He's a pure pull power hitter, and we saw that disappeared last year. And though he can hit for average, I don't think he's bouncing back like people are hoping for. I'm not believing this. I also don't think he finishes with the most plate appearances in the cleanup spot this year. I don't know who that's going to be for this team.
Herrera.
Sure. But if one of those young guys takes that step, it could be them. And that's where I can see where Arenado starts to drop in the order and becomes the 5-hole here that he probably is at this point.
You said the name
trivia
wrong.
Real quick.
Pedro Pajes. You said the name wrong.
Yeah. Burleson finished with the team leading 78 RBI last year. Nolan Arenado was third on the team with 71 RBIs on the season. Who was second? Burleson was first. Arenado was third. Who do you guys think was second on the team in RBIs last year?
Was it Goldie? I don't know.
Nope.
I
was fourth.
Goldie had
I think it was
65.
Contreras.
Contreras was ninth because
was he?
of how
he
few
was
games
hurt.
he played. He finished with 36 RBI last year.
Was it Nootbaar?
Nootbaar was
Mason-
right in front
this
of
is Masyn Winn.
Contreras. He had 45.
This is
Winn
Masyn
had
Winn.
57.
Oh, I thought this
You've
was
named
Masyn.
almost the entire roster. And
Is
haven't
it
named
Masyn Winn?
No,
Brendan Donovan.
Brendan Donovan. 73 RBI last year.
I thought this was
Pretty
a Masyn
impressive
Winn
season.
game where BK was like, see, he's already really good.
That is
no.
surprising because I don't think he typically they're hit up in the order. I guess how many games he started as the number 5-hole hitter? I thought they did that late in the year, but I guess maybe they didn't, and he ended up bringing in a bunch of RBIs.
From the 314 guys, believe it or not, BK gets fired after this show.
Why, man? What'd you do?
I don't know.
Did you curse on air?
Did you curse?
Probably did something.
Did you bring out the politics
I made this
again?
guy mad. He doesn't like my hockey takes, which is fair.
Well, they suck.
Reasonable.
They do suck, sir, madam.
Alex doesn't like him either, and he has to deal with them every day,
But that's why I'm here, right?
typically 3 to 4 times a day. So
I don't know ball, though, according to a lot of people on the text line. So
Hey, man,
that's,
we've all got our role. We know how to
I'm
fill
only
it.
here for 9 months out of the year, you know?
Dennis Gates would say, all right, I know how to get the best out of these guys. I'm going to put them in position to succeed. Now go play your role.
Oh, we could go put him in that little corner there. You could coach us up during break, BK. What the hell is that?
The crying corner.
That's a crying corner.
All right, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for Believe It or Not. Last thing here. Guys, believe it or not, Sam Darnold is the starting quarterback for the New York Giants next year.
I'm going to not believe this one. I think he's the starting quarterback for the Vegas Raiders.
That's where I'm at as well. I think he ends up there.
Yeah, I'm not going to believe it. I don't think the Giants, they're a poorly run organization. I don't think they're going to throw money at him with that roster that they have constructed. I think Raiders are the one for me for Darnold.
They made a mistake last year. Or the Raiders made a mistake previously. Giants. Take two. The Giants made a mistake previously of paying Daniel Jones big money for an average quarterback. I have to imagine they've learned the lesson from that, right? So we're not going to then double down on the mistake by giving $50 million to Sam Darnold?
And why would I go pay him if I think one of those quarterbacks falls to me in the draft? And I don't know if they're franchise-altering quarterbacks, but I'd rather give a young guy a shot on the minor league money than go out there and pay Sam Darnold $60 million.
Coming up in 15 minutes, we're going to dive into the junk drawer. Eric Longenhagen is one of the best prospect analysts out there. He does his great work for Fangraphs. He was super high on what the Cardinals could get out of Quinn Matthews this year. He's going to join us at 1 o'clock to discuss his projection for Quinn Matthews and to talk about, hey, how often do you see a prospect like Nolan Gorman or Jordan Walker struggle for a season after having early success and then bounce back afterwards? We'll ask Eric Longenhagen about that at 1 o'clock. Joey Vitale at 1:30. Jordan Walker sounds like a player that's open to the necessary changes. We'll let you hear him on that next year on 101 ESPN.
Tanner Hendrickson here, the Sports Center update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. Tonight here on 101 ESPN, we've got the Four Nations Championship game as Team USA will be taking on Canada, and we'll have pregame coverage starting at 6 o'clock with puck drop at 7. The Sports Update is driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. CNLondoff.com. Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
All right, Alex, so what do you do with a young player that came up to the big leagues and in his first season hit 275, finished with 15 homers in 100 games? What do you do with that guy? Well, you bring him back to the big leagues the next year, and you let him sink or swim until he sinks so far down that it looks like he's getting buried. And that's what happened to the Cardinals last year with Jordan Walker. With Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. Jordan Walker last year hit 200 on the season. He was 30% below league average offensively. And somehow that's with an end of season that looked better than what he was at the beginning of the year. He rebounded, quote unquote, from what he was early on. So it's totally reasonable for Cardinals fans to come into this season, I would say skeptical, on whether or not he's going to be the player that the Cardinals had sold him to be. And not just the Cardinals, but national baseball analysts that are prospects guys. They all told you, hey, this guy's going to be the next great thing, one of the top prospects in Major League Baseball. So I've been curious about Jordan Walker's offseason outlook, his mindset. T-Bone went to winter warm-up and was like, Walker,
back.
I'm a believer.
T-Bone did the Dakota Hudson from BK's visit to winter warm-up.
Exactly.
This guy's got a higher ceiling.
You heard him talk for 10 minutes, and T-Bone could not possibly have bought more in.
Jeez.
I heard another quote over the weekend, Alex. This is from Corey Miller, who does good work. He's down there in Jupiter covering the team right now. He sat down one-on-one with Jordan Walker, and here is what Jordan Walker told Corey Miller about his outlook for this upcoming season.
I have high standards for myself. I want to be one of the best players now, so whatever can help me get there. Maybe I rush myself too much, you know, but I mean, I think that to be great, I'm going to have to drive myself, make myself maybe a little uncomfortable. So, yeah, I kind of like what my thought process is at, and I don't want to kind of get comfortable telling me, oh, I'm only 22. No, I want to do it. I want to try to be the best now, you know what I'm saying? So that's kind of where my mind's at. I think baseball is always, you're going to struggle at some point. I don't think everybody, there's a reason these best guys are hitting, 300, which in hindsight, you're going to hit 3 out of 10 times, you know what I'm saying? That's still, if the way you look at another sport, it's still failing, but they're so good at their job. But it is a game of failure, man, so you kind of have to fight through and then, you know, just have all these young guys, you know, find through the big league level, and I honestly think the way it looks, I think we're going to be pretty good. So, yeah, I'm really just excited to see how it is.
I have heard now him talk about his changes that he's making to his swing, the relationship that he has already developed with Brant Brown from the offseason, him working down in Jupiter with Brant Brown one-on-one, him talking about how Brant Brown has more of like an individualized plan for each player based on the way that their body moves. He's into the biomechanics and all the nerdy stuff. That's not like the numbers, but like the data, the science behind it. I don't know if any of this is going to work. All of this right now is just talk, right? We got to see it implemented into action. But, Alex, all of the things that you would want to hear from a young player that struggled the way that Walker did last year, I do think you're starting to hear them, and I'm not sure that's always been the case in the past. I know everybody wants to blame the Cardinals for Jordan Walker's struggles. Sometimes it's about both, right? It can be an and conversation, not an or. It may not be this was Jordan Walker's fault or the Cardinals' fault. It may be this was Jordan Walker's fault and the Cardinals' fault, that things went so awry last year. I think he fell into some bad habits. Some of the things that maybe he got away with in year one crept back up, and he didn't get that positive luck a year ago. And maybe they almost like it would have regressed eventually in a positive way if they had allowed it to continue. But I like what we're hearing from Jordan Walker this offseason, man. I think his mind is in the right place, and we'll see if it ends up working out for him.
There's a quote that I used to hear people talk about in college about rock bottom, and it says, sometimes it takes hitting rock bottom to realize you need to change the way to rebuild your life. And I'm not saying Jordan Walker's needing to rebuild his life, but last year was rock bottom for him as an athlete. Like getting resent back down to the AAA level when you were a major league player and the expectations were there for you. And they basically said, no, man, you're not cutting it. And you're not going to play here and you're going to go down there and you're going to stay down there.
Yeah, that's what's different from 2023 to 2024.
Yeah, they let him go down and brought him back.
No. You stay down in AAA.
Right.
2 years ago, it was, hey, tweak a couple of things, we'll get you back up there.
In 2023, he had never played at the major league level, so it's like it's not going back. But you finished out the season in 2023 at the major league level, and then you go back to the next season, and then you start it, and then you get kicked down. That's where rock bottom was for me. And to me, this sounds like a guy that recognized, yeah, I'm at rock bottom. I can't keep, and I don't know personally what he's gone through, if there was a little bit of stubbornness that he was unwilling to change what the Cardinals were hoping for, or maybe he didn't believe what the Cardinals were telling him to change. Regardless of what it was, it sounds like a guy that's come to terms with, it's like, look, man, if I'm going to be at the major league level, if I'm going to get to the point that I want to get to, I got to listen to everything. Brant Brown's in here now. It's seemingly they like everything that Brant Brown is providing. This is a player to me that said, I can't go back to rock bottom. I gotta find my way out of that and never go back again. And good for him. Is it going to work? I don't know, because I'm not going to buy into the hype that was there 2 years ago about Jordan Walker. Now you're in the prove it to me period. And for Jordan Walker, I think he can, but it's going to take a full season of you to show me that you're the player that the Cardinals were hoping that you were.
The YouTube chat is available for you at youtube.com/101 ESPN STL. Don Peepy's over there and says,
hey.
Guys, I'm a very religious man, but God is not going to help me with a curveball. It's fair. And you can say all of the right things, and ultimately you get out there and you see a slider that's 90 miles an hour and it's got this unbelievable movement. You don't see that in AAA. You don't see that in AA. And you've got to find a way to spit at it. And that is, to me, the biggest question with Jordan Walker. 2 years ago, he did a pretty decent job on that. Now, he swung and missed way too often, and it was frustrating at times. He still had a whiff rate of 39%. But last year, it was so much worse. Against breaking balls 2 years ago, 290 batting average. Expected batting average of 270. Last year, batting average of 200 and an expected batting average of 220. He was terrible against breaking balls last year. And worse was what he did against fastballs. Because I think he was almost like in his head at all times where he just had no clue what was coming his way. The dude hit 185 against fastballs last year. If you can't hit fastballs, you can't be in the big leagues. Flat out. You have to be able to do your damage against fastballs. So we'll see what he's able to do this year. It's about pitch selection and pitch recognition for him as much as it is anything else. He's got all the talent in the world. Hits it on the ground too much. That is what it is. But he's talented. He's got to figure out the other side of the game.
Don Peepy was quoting Major League.
Sure.
Oh.
It was Eddie Harris's quote.
Oh, well, that's a good callback then. Yeah. But, I mean, you're spot on. If you can't hit a fastball, you're not going to be doing anything at the big league level. And I think you're right. I think he got caught in between. And I think a lot of what Turner Ward would say, you know, because Turner Ward and Alec Burleson's been the guy that's kind of one I'm referencing here. But Burley's whole thing was, hey, I'm going to pick a spot, and that's where I'm going to do the damage at is, hey, if there's a pitch in this sector of the strike zone, I'm going to crush that pitch. And I think that's where Walker got a little skeptical last year, was picking his spots, not knowing what to do. I think the same thing's being said by Brant Brown, but it's just being said from a different voice. And that's why I think a change was necessary. And you mentioned rock bottom. I think Walker knows what I said yesterday, which is this is the last year to really prove there is no more leeway following this season. You're either a guy that's part of the core or you're a guy that's not. And I think he's come to the realization of, hey, I was a gifted prospect. I knew the organization was going to do things, kind of really dictate how they want to develop me. Now you're beyond that point now. Now it is, hey, this is the final shot before they may have to go a different direction.
I'm with that. I think this is the final shot for Walker to prove what he is as a player. I think it's the final shot for Gorman to prove what he is as a player. I think it is the final shot for Nootbaar to prove that he can stay healthy, because eventually you just need more certainty in left field. I like Lars Nootbaar as a player. I think he's underrated by most fans. But if Lars Nootbaar can't stay healthy, then I can't go into the season knowing what to expect out of that spot. Lars Nootbaar then becomes really valuable for a team like the Dodgers, where they can deal with it. Dude, if you play 100 games, cool. We've got a bunch of dudes that can make up for the lack of production that we're getting there. But on this team in this market, with the way that they're trying to construct their roster, he becomes more of a trade asset than what he is for most other teams that are truly out there. Like, he'd be great for the Phillies. Great player for the Phillies, because they've got the players to make up for it. Last year, they missed Trey Turner for like half the season. It was fine. They had enough dudes around him to be able to make up for it. You need Lars Nootbaar to be one of the guys that really contributes offensively. So I think those are probably the three players to me. Do you guys have anybody else that's like truly a make or break season for them here in St. Louis?
No, I don't think so.
That's it.
At least on the
those are
position player side. I'm sure on the pitching side of things, there's guys, but
I'm not sure there is on the pitching side.
Yeah, like I don't think
Yeah, I
like
guess
it's
that's
make or
true.
break for Palante.
Like if McGreevy doesn't end up getting a long extended run in the rotation this year, he'll get it next year.
yeah, I guess that's true because
I think
the
it-
because of the
bullpen guys really are in the
If
final
there's
shot too.
if there's pitchers, it's guys that are like the fringe roster players, like Thompson, Graceffo, like
John
those
King,
guys.
Jojo Romero, like,
Yeah.
can you become more than what
Yeah.
you've been? Are you going to be worth the money that you're going to
That's not franchise altering, right?
No,
like,
not at all.
You got those position players like Gorman, Walker, Newbar, who you said. Like, those guys don't reach their potential. That's franchise altering of, okay, now how do we pivot? Like, Walker was supposed to be the guy that was the next wave, and Gorman was the next wave of, like, the middle of the order bats. Well, they don't develop into that. That's something all of a sudden the organization has to search for and figure out.
Which is why this is so fascinating to me because you listed 3 pretty impactful players that are a part of this transition. This is more than a transition if these 3 guys don't live up to what you're expecting them to be. Now you're going to have to go out there and find those guys, which means spending money.
I'd
Well,
say
one of them, like Gorman's big because he's the left-handed power bat. But you do have your replacement potentially internally. Like the next guy is J.J. Weatherholt.
Yeah.
That's going to be in a similar position.
Not a power bat, though.
I don't know, man. It sounds like he could hit 25 homer. It's different. It's different. Gorman could potentially be a 35 homer from the left side. Like you don't have that specific skill, that handedness in your system anywhere. Nobody else projects to be that. But maybe you end up getting a better player and a better hitter from J.J. Weatherholt. He hits like 280 for a year and 25 homers. That's a guy I would certainly love to have at second base. But Walker, you have no replacement for.
Nope.
Nobody. And Lars Nootbaar, at least like, hey, I've got Donovan. Walker's the guy. That's the one you can't miss on. Because he's got the potential to be a 6'5 monster in the middle of your order that plays capable defense in right field, hits 280 for any given season, hits 25 homers, steals 15 to 20 bags. Like, that is the dude that you can't miss on. And if they miss on him, somebody on the text line said, so if are you telling me if they end up failing, Walker and Gorman should be traded at the end of the season? Potentially. That's what's at stake.
And
Nobody
Newbar.
this year, upside or downside, has more at stake than Jordan Walker, Lars Nootbaar, Nolan Gorman. Their future with this franchise is potentially dependent on how they perform in 2025. It cannot be overstated how much this is a huge year for those 3 individuals on the Cardinals. All right, with Alex Ferrario and Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Brandon Kiley. In 15 minutes, we're going to talk to Eric Longenhagen, one of the best prospects writers out there. He's incredibly high on one of the Cardinals' young pitchers, Quinn Matthews. Says he could be the next version of Tanner Bybee in terms of how he flies through the system and immediately makes an impact on a major league rotation. Why does he view him that way, and what does he think he could be once he gets to the major league level? We'll talk to Eric about that and talk to him about the potential bounce back candidates for Gorman and Walker this season in 15 minutes. The junk drawer is next. It's time for Alex to get roasted here on BK and Ferrario. Alongside Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. So it's Alex's turn to get roasted. He wasn't in last week when Grok from Twitter, their AI system, told me, you're the kind of sports fan who thinks analyzing a game is just about who got the most yards and who's the GOAT. You probably think the Super Bowl is just another Sunday to yell at the TV, yet you tweet like you got a playbook in your back pocket. Your takes on football are as deep as the kiddie pool, and your predictions, let's just say they've aged like milk left out in the sun.
Nailed
Continued
it.
from there.
They
but
continued?
That's the gist of it.
Wow.
So it's Alex's turn now to get roasted by Grok. He just put in for that roast. Alex, what do they have to say about you in this AI opportunity?
This one's not as long, apparently, as yours. All right, let's see. ... You're the kind of person who probably thinks, quote, low battery warnings are just friendly suggestions. I'd say you're a walking participation trophy, but that imply you showed up to but that would imply you showed up to something worth participating in. Your life's so unseasoned, even a salt packet would ghost you. Want me to keep going, or is your ego already crying in the corner?
I'd say type in
No,
more.
I could type in more?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. It's thinking. If that's the insult to me that I don't have a
You need a little more
interesting
salt in your life.
excitement live. I got 3 kids. That's about as
Alex
exciting
is
as
like,
it can ask for.
that's true. I
sit
agree
at home.
with that.
I had a vacation last week and I sat at home every day. All right, here we go. Oh, you're back for seconds. Brave, but not surprising. Massagism? I can't pronounce that word. Apparently seems like your only talent. You're the human equivalent of a Wi-Fi signal with 1 bar. Technically there, but nobody's counting on you. I'd say you're a hot mess, but that would apply. There's something warm or interesting about you. Room temperature oatmeal's more your vibe. Keep coming back. I've got plenty more where this came from.
So they basically find Alex to be incredibly boring.
Yeah, man.
Now,
Dude,
to be fair,
fine.
Alex doesn't really tweet a whole lot. Alex basically
neither
tweets
do
out
I.
sure.
I tweet blues.
Yeah,
Mine's
Alex
blues
tweets out,
post-game
hey,
reaction.
Here's the Blues lineup for tonight.
No,
And
I don't do that. I give opinions on
here's
the
a
Blues.
video. Here are my 3 Blues takeaways for the day. This is not to critique. It's a healthier lifestyle than what I live.
Yeah, I unfortunately don't have enough time to sit and tweet my thoughts out on games. My luck is I catch the second half of the game because bedtime. I did more just because why not? This hasn't insulted me yet, so let's see if it finally finds a wound at some point. Well, you're still here. Wow, you've got the persistence of a telemarketer and the charm of a soggy sock. You're like the background character in a movie. Nobody remembers your lines, and the plot's better without you. I'd call you a train wreck, but that would suggest you're moving fast enough to crash. You're more like a stalled golf cart in a ditch. Makes sense. Ready for round flower, or is your self-esteem finally waving the white flag?
All right. Well,
Wow.
They didn't get Alex's ass.
This actually just complimented me because, yeah, I do live a boring lifestyle, and it's fun. That's what
They
happens when
find
you
you
got
to
3.
be pretty milquetoast. It's effectively what they said in 150 different words.
I will be a lot more exciting in about 21 years when all of my kids have moved out and gone to college.
All right, he's
I
Alex's
don't believe
T-Bone.
that,
I'm
but
BK.
okay.
Coming up in the 1 o'clock hour, we'll hear from Joey Vitale. We'll talk about the opportunity that lies ahead for Jordan Binnington tonight. And we're going to talk next with Eric Longenhagen, one of the best prospect writers in the country. He writes about them for Fangraphs. We're going to talk to him about Quinn Matthews and the potential for a bounce-back season this year from Jordan Walker and Nolan Gorman. Eric Longenhagen of Fangraphs joins us next year on BK and Ferrario. Alex, I love reading the prospects reports, and one of my favorites comes from Eric Longenhagen over on Fangraphs. He wrote recently of his top 100 prospects in Major League Baseball. The top prospect in the Cardinals system on that list was Quinn Matthews. He came in at number 32 overall. The Cardinals pitching prospect, the final paragraph here says, his secondary stuff remains strong. Slider has enjoyed an uptick in velocity along with the rest of his pitches. None of it has had a detrimental impact on his command or his mechanics. He still looks like a super smooth operator who takes a consistent direct line to the plate and fills the zone. He's on pace to do what Tanner Bybee did in Cleveland, which is race to the big leagues in a mid-rotation capacity after looking like the most vanilla of back-end starters just a year before. That was written by Eric Longenhagen of Fangraphs, and he joins us now via the Callier and Thompson hotline here on BK and Ferrario. Eric, we appreciate the time, man. Wanted to talk to you a little bit about the Cardinals system and most specifically about Quinn Matthews. What did he do last year that has shot him up these lists and allowed him to now be a top 50 prospect in the sport in your eyes?
Yeah, hey guys, thanks for having me on. There's a lot of pitchers across pro baseball. They're just teams who apply sports science and find a way to coax 2, 3, 4 more ticks of velocity out of any of these guys. Even like Matthews did come out of a big program like Stanford, there's just not always coherent player development going on at a lot of these schools. And, you know, teams take advantage of that, and you end up with a guy like Quinn Matthews as late as he did in the draft and add a few ticks to his fastball, and here we are. And the other thing about Matthews is, you know, he was being ridden really hard at Stanford. He's throwing 140-plus pitches, some outings. You just don't know what's going to happen when you take a guy out of that environment and then into one that is more manicured, one that has his development in mind, and you know, he's just being deployed a little bit more reasonably. And the other thing with Matthews that stood out to me last year was physically he just changed. Like, he was one of those really skinny 6'4" guys whose uniform wears him. And then last year, by midseason, by the time we got to the Futures game, basically, you know, clearly this guy had been in the weight room. And so all that stuff you start to realize, like, this guy has changed. And I buy that he's changed because there's just so much screaming at you that's letting you know he's changed and that this is sustainable. And he's still, you know, remained quite polished as a pitcher.
So, Eric, talking about that development, last year he made a pretty quick trajectory from A-ball all the way up to AAA. And AAA was a short sample size at the end of the year. It was 16 2/3 innings, but he did struggle a little bit at that level. What stuck out to you about the success that he had in lower-level minor leagues versus the struggles that he hit once he got to AAA?
Yeah, some of it at AAA, hitting environment, just the ballparks at AAA make it very, very difficult to have, like, a normal-looking line in ERA. So that's one thing. And the other thing is, you know, at some point last year, Matthews did blow through his, like, career-high innings threshold. The number of prospects in the minors who have successfully worked, like, 140-plus innings in a minor league season, and you can count them on your fingers and toes. And so, you know, anytime a guy is at the very, very end of his rope like that at the end of the year, you expect there to be a little bit of a dip. And I think it was perfectly natural to see that happen. I don't think it had anything to do with the quality of the hitting at AAA all of a sudden being too much for him, more just the situation we were in here where career-high innings and the way the ballparks at AAA tend to play.
All right, so you brought up the name Tanner Bybee in your report, and I know that's based on, you know, screaming through the minor league system and the way that they went about it, but is that the kind of upside that you see in Quinn Matthews, or does it look a little different if and when he reaches the big league level in your mind?
I think that's about right. I don't think Quinn Matthews is going to be Justin Verlander or Max Scherzer or anything like that. I think that, you know, on a contending postseason team, that Quinn Matthews is, you know, your team's third starter. And there's something about pitching, like having done this prospect analyst and evaluation job now since 2016, and having done some audits on past lists, you know, that content's like been up at the site as part of the week of content we've had at the site as well. It's just, you know, the pitchers in the minors who tend to pan out are the ones who are closest and have proven that they're good, more than the A-ball high school, you know, draftees. And so there's a certainty factor at play here with Matthews, too. And the thing about Bybee that's similar is that, Tanner Bybee was sitting 89 in his draft year at Cal State Fullerton. You think of Cal State Fullerton is like a good college program, but as far as developing players, and they're just not. So yeah, that's been the case at Stanford for a long time across a couple different coaching tenures. So with Matthews, it's just, he's there, he's ready, he's polished. He doesn't walk anybody other than that little stretch at the end of the year at AAA. And his stuff is playing better than it did in college. And mid-rotation guy on a good team is a tremendous outcome for someone who he took in the 4th round.
Eric Longenhagen is our guest here on 101 ESPN. You can see his top 100 prospect report over at Fangraphs right now. Final question that I've got as a follow-up on Quinn Matthews for you, Eric. Is he a guy that, in your opinion, needs more seasoning down in AAA this year, or does he feel like he is basically ready-made for Major League Baseball already?
I think in a vacuum that he is ready. The problem that the Cardinals are faced with is they just have so much depth on their 40-man roster already, and that group lacks flexibility. So you're going to have to, at some point, someone who's projected to be on the big league roster as camp breaks is just going to have to get hurt, or, and even then, the AAA group of Tank Hence, Sem Robersi, Mike McGreevy, Roderick Munoz, all those guys are already on the 40-man. You have to go out of your way to make a roster move to promote Matthews. To me, if he kicks down the door and is just obviously one of their 3 or 4 best starters by the middle of the year, and the team is competitive, and it just makes sense to cost yourself that roster spot, that roster move by doing it, then that's when I would expect him to debut. But there are plenty of teams across baseball rosters who would love to have a Quinn Matthews in their opening day rotation.
Eric, you mentioned Tink Hansen. I think that's the other pitcher that Cardinals fans are very curious / excited about. I know he dealt with some injuries last year, but what's the expectations from your perspective of Tink Hansen's growth this year?
I would expect Tink to mostly play a developmental role on the 40-man this year. He's still got all 3 of his options left. They've handled him with kid gloves in the minors. He still has not exceeded 100 innings in a single calendar year. And so I really would like to see him do that before you just thrust him into the big league environment. Maybe sometime in the middle of the year they say, let's just deploy this guy as a nasty multi-inning reliever. At the big league level, we can sort of limit his innings that way, but he can have an impact on the big league club at the same time, kind of a happy medium there to get his feet wet. That would be pretty interesting. The thing about Tink that has been frustrating is that his velocity has not climbed. His velocity has sort of plateaued and at times been not so great. And during those stretches, he's just learned how to pitch. His changeup is amazing. And both his breaking balls are still above average to plus pitches, and he's developed really impressive command and had success, even though his fastball velocity has not been what it was when he was at his peak. And so I think, some of these guys showing you that they have the capacity to make adjustments before they're even at the big league level, that makes me feel very confident that they're going to be able to continue to do that. And so that's, I still feel good about Take, even though we're probably more like 2 seasons away from seeing him entrenched on the big league pitching staff.
We're talking to Eric Longenhagen for another few minutes here on 101 ESPN. Eric, the other reason I wanted to reach out to you is because you have this Rolodex of previous prospects and what they ended up doing in the big league level, whether that was success or at times failure. And the Cardinals have a couple of guys that were considered to be major prospects in their system, and Nolan Gorman and Jordan Walker. And in year 1, 2023, both of them had differing degrees of success. Nolan Gorman was 15% above league average. Same thing was true for Jordan Walker. Now, defensively, there were some concerns, but they looked like they were on the up and up. And then last year, both of them cratered. Gorman struck out way too much. Walker couldn't get the ball off of the ground and was striking out too often as well. I'm curious, because you have more of the 30,000-foot view on prospects than we do here locally. What is the history in your mind, or is there much of a history of guys that struggled the way that Gorman and Walker did after having a little bit of brief success early on in their careers to then rebound off of that and still continue on that upward trajectory? Is that common, or would those guys be considered outliers if they figure it out this year?
It's common, but it's common in both directions. So with Gorman specifically last year, the big league pitching made an adjustment to him. And the rate of fastballs thrown against Nolan Gorman last year exploded. Some specific data points here are Nolan Gorman, his miss rate against fastballs last year was 34%. The big league average is 23%. And so you could see from 23 to 24, fastballs against Nolan Gorman go from like 46% to 51, 53%. Well, those are pitchers making an adjustment to him. And now it's incumbent upon Gorman to make a subsequent adjustment. And the truth is that there are just lots of guys who cannot handle big league velocity. There are so many left-handed hitters especially who, having done this long enough now, guys where there's an underlying red flag that's not necessarily apparent in the data is when you see them swinging underneath tons of fastballs. Because in the minors, pitchers are sitting like 92. Like at AAA last year, guys sat 92 on average. And you go weeks in the big leagues and you see maybe a couple of guys who only throw 92, and they're in the big leagues because they do other stuff well then. And so, that's like Nolan Gorman's problem. I do not know what's going to happen with that, whether he's going to be able to make that adjustment. In Walker's case, some of the stuff on defense has been frustrating. His feel for playing out there in the outfield is just not good. He runs really, I could see why they decided to do it. For a 6'6", 250-pound guy, he's unbelievably fast for someone who's that size, and he's got an amazing arm. And so, running it back with him out there, we'll see how that goes. Walker's another one where the chase against breaking balls, he's just never been able to identify breaking balls in a satisfactory way, and you just see pitchers just like, here you go, good luck, here's another slider. But breaking balls play like plus pitches against Jordan Walker. Now, Walker's only 22, and he just has so many outlier physical characteristics that if I'm betting on one of these two guys to be the one who makes the adjustments over time, it's going to be Walker, just because he is freakish in a way that the players who succeed, even though they're flawed, tend to be. Like if you sort the Fangraphs, contact rate leaderboard so that you're seeing the guys who make the least amount of contact, it's Giancarlo Stanton, it's Aaron Judge, it's Julio Rodriguez, it's Shohei Ohtani. Like these guys are all at the bottom. Teoscar Hernandez is a great example of a guy who pops late, but it's still in a big enough way that you go, okay, this player turned out to be quite good. But it took until his mid to late 20s for him to do it. And that's what I think we're looking at with Jordan Walker, where there's just so much power and talent there that at some point he's going to find something that allows him to succeed in a meaningful way. With Gorman, it's tougher because there are just so many players whose flaw is their flaw, is Gorman's flaw, and there are just so many guys who throw hard at the big league level. And if that's your problem, then good luck.
All right, Eric, we'll get you out of here on this. Final question that I've got for you. I think I'm higher on Ivan Herrera than basically anybody in St. Louis. The guy hit 300 for the Cardinals last year and no batting average, not the end-all, be-all. Totally understand that. But he hit the ball incredibly hard, and he looked the part when he was out there behind the plate for the Cardinals, at least on the offensive side of things. Am I crazy for thinking that Ivan Herrera might have the highest upside of any of the Cardinals' current prospects that are already at the big league level? Is that crazy offensively for Ivan Herrera to have the highest upside?
That is not crazy at all to me. I think that Herrera's got some immaturity on defense that is part of why it took him so long to break through. But so many catchers don't really break until their mid to late 20s. It is just such a grind of a position. And a catcher who does one good thing on offense tends to be a good primary catcher. And I think with Ivan Herrera, you're looking at someone who's got the opportunity to do two or three good things. Like the contact and power blend there is uncommon for a catcher. And I totally agree with you based on the value of that position. That's a young potential impact player who, if you're betting on one guy to blossom in the next 2 to 3 years, I think that can be your guy. Totally reasonable.
Boom. Love it. Eric, I appreciate it, not just because you agreed with my take there. Always enjoy reading your work over at Fangraphs. People can check it out over there. That's where his top 100 prospects list is. They've been doing a bunch of stuff this week over on Fangraphs, kind of preparing for the 2025 season. Always appreciate the time, my friend. We'll talk with you again soon.
Appreciate it. See you guys.
Absolutely. That's Eric Longenhagen, one of the best prospect writers in the business. I always learn a lot by reading his work. If you're looking for like guys that have been the most accurate over the last decade or so, he's right up there, man. He's really good with this stuff, and he puts in the work, which is not always the case for some of these guys on the national basis. Alex, I thought the most interesting thing there might have been twofold. One, what he said about Quinn Matthews being a 3 on a good team. That doesn't mean like this year.
That's a 2 on this team.
Yeah, this year you're probably talking about like, I don't know, Andre Palante being your number 3 starter.
Honestly, it might be a number 1 on this team.
That's a little different than what you're expecting currently. He's probably your 2 if and when he reaches the big league level. The other thing is what he had to say about Walker and Gorman. It sure didn't sound to me like he was particularly optimistic about Gorman figuring it out.
Yeah, well, and I don't blame him. I mean, basically, you're just hoping you make contact if you're Nolan Gorman because you've got the power, but it's pretty evident for how long he's been a kind of a pro baller to where it's been in the AAA level or the Major League level. He just struggles with identifying certain pitches, and he's swing and miss type of guy. Can he hit 40 bombs? Absolutely, but you better hope you make a lot of contact and don't miss the ball. So I can understand, like, the hope. I think there were people excited about Nolan Gorman with the potential of moving on from Nolan Arenado and just seeing him at a different position every day in the lineup. And now that Arenado's here, you're going to see him at second base probably every single day. But I wonder if the hope is really starting to dwindle from him being a face of the franchise to, man, if you're not a 30 home run hitter, you might be better trade bait than a part of this team's future.
Yeah, him describing Gorman there and like struggling with that fastball reminded me a lot of Joey Gallo, of a guy that can't catch the heat when they go up in the zone. And that was even the thing that started. I mean, he mentioned baseball catching up to him. You started to see that in that 23 season, the one that you referenced says, hey, this guy was pretty good, 800 OPS. Started to creep in then. They really went after it in 2024. I also, like, he mentioned, like, hey, I'm not worried about Walker. He clearly can't still lay off of the breaking pitches. That still is one that worries me. And I know what he was saying of, hey, there's so much talent there. He's a freak of nature for crying out loud. Like, he will figure it out at some point. I don't know, man. Like, it's hard to look at, especially now in the modern day of pitching where you're seeing guys throw their best pitch more than a fastball. So if you're going up against these slider specialists, like, I just don't know if he's going to be able to make that adjustment or not. And that's the one that worries me. Maybe he does. The fastball one is very alarming for Gorman, but the slider one still, to me, is red alarm bells for Jordan Walker.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to monitor this year. Those are 2 of the guys that are most interesting, and they have a specific weakness in their swings, and we'll find out if they're able to make the adjustment. That is priority number 1, 2, and 3 for Brant Brown. We knew what the priority was for John Mozeliak 1, 2, and 3 this offseason. He didn't get it done. We'll see if Brant Brown can get his priority done this year. Coming up in 15 minutes, it's Joey Vitale, but next, huge opportunity in front of Jordan Binnington. Alex has a really interesting note on what he could potentially begin tonight. We'll talk about that next year on 101 ESPN. Alongside Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. Hey, U.S. versus Canada tonight. Pre-game coverage at 6 o'clock. Puck drop at 7. Looking forward to this one, man. It's a title game for Four Nations face-off. It's all been leading to this. The last game between these two was unbelievable. There's a lot going on with this game already. Again, I'm not trying to get political here. Trump has become involved in a way where he was talking to the team earlier today. Now it sounds like he might be at the game after previously he wasn't expected to be there. So
the Prime Minister should call Canada and make this an even playing field.
I mean, it's just a huge game, and it's impossible to deny the political backdrop to all of it that's taking place right now. And then you add in the Kachucks, who have become just face of the NHL level worthy players right now in this tournament. And Matthew was already there. Brady has inserted himself into that mix. The injuries that are starting to pile up. There's every reason to be excited about this game. But Alex, when you're looking at it through the St. Louis perspective, Binner is obviously just such a massive storyline. Team Canada fans wanted him potentially run out of the net earlier on, especially after that loss against the U.S. He has stayed in net, and he's expected to start for them tonight. If Binner wins tonight, if Team Canada wins, and he's a big reason why, what does it mean for Binner? The way that he's viewed, how this impacts his legacy on the NHL and his remembrance from Canada fans and really just hockey fans internationally. What does this game mean for Jordan Binnington?
I mean, you said it, legacy. I mean, if you're Jordan Binnington, the writing's kind of already on the wall of what the season is going to be. And look, who knows, do you get traded? What's the rest of your career look like with St. Louis? Do you get another shot at a Stanley Cup? But if you're him, you already got a Stanley Cup. Now you start talking legacy with Jordan Binnington. And if you're in this tournament and you perform well tonight to win, it pretty much guarantees you're going to be on Team Canada next year in the Olympics. And Matt DeFranks actually brought this up in his Post-Dispatch Blues chat that he was doing yesterday, because somebody asked him, hey, does Jordan Binnington have a shot at the Triple Gold Club? And for people that don't understand what that is, you win gold at the Olympics, you win gold at the World Cup of Hockey, the tournament that takes place at the end of the regular season while the postseason's taking place. A lot of the time, some guys that aren't in the playoffs go international and they play for their country World Cup. Last year, Binnington did it. I think they came in 4th place. You win gold there, gold at the Olympics, and you win the Stanley Cup. And Jay Bolmeister, former Blue, he's done that already. He's got all 4 of them, and you got the gold as well with the World Juniors.
Hall of Famer.
Yeah, and that's where Jordan Binnington could potentially go. This was the stat that really got me, though. He would be the first goaltender in the Triple Gold Club. Marty Brodeur wouldn't. Marty Brodeur is not there because he got 2 silvers at World Cup of Hockey tournament. Roberto Luongo and Carey Price, who have golds and others, have never won a Stanley Cup. And Patrick Waugh never won a gold at the Olympics. So Jordan Binnington would have something that Marty Brodeur, Patrick Waugh, Carey Price, Roberto Luongo all have never done in their career. Man. So if you're him, and I know it's an individual stat right now and the team stat's important, but right now the team's not going anywhere. You start with something that none of those guys had because Four Nations wasn't even a thing. This offseason takes place, you miss the playoffs, you probably go back for another World Cup to try and win gold. Then next year, you're going to be on Team Canada, you're going to be the goaltender, you go for a gold medal there. And then you've already got that Stanley Cup behind you. This is a massive legacy moment for Jordan Binnington's career as a just professional hockey player.
He wants to be remembered, or at least this is me projecting. His career thus far, he's remembered for that 2019 Cup run. Because he's been an average goalie in the regular season. Let's just be honest about it. In his postseason moments, he's stood up. But during the regular season, he's fine. He's fine. Probably top 15, 20 goalie in the NHL, I would say, for a regular season, just setting aside everything that happens in the postseason. So his current best version of himself, legacy-wise, is big game goalie. Guy you want in net when the moments are the biggest. This is one of those games, man. And so if he wants to continue to add on to that, this is the kind of game where you show out. And you give yourself the opportunity, you give your team the opportunity to win it in gold in this Four Nations face-off, an event that has had so much, I would say, runway thus far. People have really bought in to what the league is selling with this event. It's a big jump, potential jumping off point for him to get all of those accolades that you're talking about. If you already have the cup, you could potentially get the Four Nations face-off gold. And then even if he doesn't get the World Championship, if it's just the Olympics gold as well, just those 3 things that you're able to get on your resume, that has the potential, at least in my mind, to start building a Hall of Fame resume for Jordan Binnington. That is the start of it.
Well, put Colton Parayko's name in this as well, because Parayko's got a cup. He'll probably go and he'll be on the Olympics team next year if you win gold. Now, this is different because goalies have never done it. He'd be the first one, and Parayko would be one of 29 other players that have done it. But again, you're starting a Hall of Fame career when you put yourself in a conversation with guys who are very few have done something in the NHL.
We got somebody in the YouTube chat that said if he loses tonight, he probably won't be going to the Olympics. Do you think that's true?
No, he's going to the Olympics.
You think?
Yeah.
Even if they lose like 4-2 and Binnington's at fault?
He'll be in the Olympics. Now, is he the starter in the Olympics? I don't think so, but they'll be taking him. I mean,
okay, that's what I mean. Is
he the starter? No, it'll be a pure competition probably of seeing what happens next year.
But if he wins tonight,
he's your starter next year.
It would be a pretty big surprise if he's not the starter in net for Team Canada when the Olympics come around.
Because the coaching staff is probably going to be the same. It's
huge opportunity, man.
Yeah.
It's a huge opportunity for Benner tonight.
I mean, the thing about it is Canada doesn't have a whole lot of depth at goaltending. Like they have the kid in Washington right now, Logan Thompson, who a lot of people were saying should be on this roster. I don't disagree for how he's played this season, but this is the first time he's been this good. Aiden Hill has only had a couple of years where he's played at this level. If Binnington goes out there and just dominates, yeah, I mean, you could write it in pen right now that he'll be your starting goalie.
He's Alex Ferrario. That's Tanner Hendrickson. I'm Brandon Kiley. Game tonight on 101 ESPN starting at 6 o'clock. Buck drop at 7. U.S. versus Team Canada. Should be one hell of a game. Who do you think's winning this one?
USA 3-2 final score.
T-Bone?
I got Canada 3-1. Binnington shows out.
Okay, USA 4-3. I think it goes a little higher scoring than the two of
My
you.
3-2, by the way, empty netter 3. Binnington only gives up 2.
We'll get Joey Vitale's thoughts on that and how he's feeling about the Blues as they get ready to come back from this Four Nations face-off when he joins us next year on 101 ESPN. Hey, it's BK for my friends over at Victory Men's Health. It is time to unlock your inner champion. For different people, that means different things. For you, maybe that means going over to Victory Men's Health and finding out where your testosterone levels are. Are you feeling the same way when you wake up in the morning? Do you have that same energy that you once did? Maybe the workouts just aren't quite giving you the same results. It could be due to low testosterone. It happens. So go over to Victory Men's Health. Check them out on their website, victorymenshealth.com. Upper right-hand corner, click Book Now. It's a super easy process. Put in your name, email, phone number. Tell them BK with 101 ESPN sent you, and then tell them how they can unlock your inner champion. If it's not low testosterone, maybe it is getting a little bit of help with that unwanted weight that you're trying to lose. They can help you out with that. For some people, it's as simple as going over there and finding out about their vitamin infusion options. They told me about one that they've got that could be a really good option for me prior to races. So if you're a runner or if you're going out there having a crazy vacation, whatever it is, vitamin infusions are an option for you. Red light therapy is something else that they offer. It's all available to you at Victory Men's Health and online at victorymenshealth.com.
Tanner Hendrickson here with a Sports Center update brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling. Tonight here on 101 ESPN, we've got the Four Nations Championship game for you as USA takes on Canada. We'll have pregame coverage starting at 6 o'clock with puck drop at 7. This Sports Center update is brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling, independent American Standard heating and air conditioning dealer.
Alongside Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. You got BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. Happy to be joined via the Callier and Thompson hotline by our friend, Blues analyst for 101 ESPN, and of course, FanDuel Sports Midwest. He is Joey Vitale joining us as he does each and every Thursday here on the show. Joe, how you doing, my friend?
Joey!
Welcome back after 2 weeks off.
What's going on, guys? Welcome back. How you doing?
Doing fantastic. Big game tonight, U.S. versus Canada. Puck drop at 7. You'll be able to hear right here on 101 ESPN. Joe, what are you looking forward to in this one, my friend? Plenty of storylines around.
Yeah, I mean, listen, it's going to be intense. I don't know if it can match the intensity. How can it of the previous game with the 3 fights in the first 10 seconds there with one of our own truly only, the Colton Parayko getting in the mix there as well. So the fireworks were real. I was in Quebec with my son, and we were watching the game at our billet families, and you just couldn't believe what you were seeing. And, what to expect? Gosh, I have no idea. But is it going to come close to that? I sure hope so. If it's half of as intense as we saw last week, guys, we're in for a treat tonight.
Joe, we all know that the Tkachuk brothers are just unicorns in the game. They got the new school skill, talent, but they play with that old school mentality. I don't know if other teams, players try and emulate the way that those guys play. Do you think the spotlight that they've garnered over these last few weeks with this Four Nations break, do you think other players look at this and say, maybe I need to add a little old school to my game?
I think I would hope so, Alex. I mean, look, you look at the Tkachuk brothers, and, someone said it who I was watching the game with the other day, what they are, and it makes perfect sense. They are like two 70-year-old men, 70, I'm talking 70, like men on the ice that have had a second shot at doing this again. We're all at a bar, we're on the couch, we're all a bunch of has-beens, right? And you're sitting on the couch and you're saying to yourself, man, if I was in this game, I would do this. If I was in that game, I would do that, right? We all have this glimpse of looking backwards about, man, I shoulda, coulda, woulda. Right. And in that moment, because as you're older, you realize what that moment is. When you're a player, a lot of times you're so consumed in your own game, your own world. You don't see the big picture, and you don't see it from almost like a 30,000 foot view of what it is. That's what the Tkachuk brothers do so well. They're so good about understanding the pulse of the moment, what the game needs, what the particular period needs, and ultimately what the sports needs. And I think that to me, it really stood out. It's a great comment. They're like a bunch of old men who someone came to them at 7 years old and said, hey, you get a chance to go back and do it all over again. Go make it worth it. And they're not playing with any regrets. The passion, the emotion. Truly, are we going to see one in the Blues uniform before they both retire? I sure hope so, because they're fun to watch.
Joe, when you think about it, like Matthew Tkachuk has already become one of the faces of the NHL based on their Stanley Cup run and their deep playoff runs in each of the past couple of postseasons. Has Brady Tkachuk, based on this performance in the Four Nations face-off, kind of emerged as one of the faces of the NHL as well?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the only thing that he didn't have was the Stanley Cup ring so far. Right. So I think that's the only thing holding him back. But I think that Matthew certainly has cemented himself as being a legend of the game, and certainly in this era based off of his Stanley Cup championship. And not only the win, but how he performed in that run. Brady, obviously, I think he is close. He's, if he can get there, obviously he's right there. They both bring such a different dynamic to the game. In some ways, I think if you were to ask 100 people who would you rather have, I actually think the majority would take Brady. I think the size, the physicality, the fighting ability, I mean, certainly his net front presence. Is he a player that can figure it out in Ottawa with getting some good players around him where they can make a push? Certainly looks like they're having some success this year. Or is he a player like Matthew, who was in a very similar situation, guys, that just need to get on a better team with some better players around him. And then, of course, he got traded to the Florida Panthers, and it could be something like that for Brady as well. But one thing is certain, no matter how good you are in this league, you need to be surrounded by good players. It's really hard to be a good player on a bad team, but that's what's also amazing about Brady, because he's been stuck in Ottawa for a while there, but he continues to produce and he continues to be an all-star, even though he's been on a bad team. So certainly impressive in itself.
Joe, I don't know if I've ever gotten the chance to ask you this, so I apologize if this brings up like sore wounds. But did you ever get close to a chance to maybe represent USA for anything, whether it was like a world championship tournament?
No, nothing like that, Alex. I quit high school. I quit hockey in high school. I played football. I didn't.
You were the captain at Northeastern, Joe.
I know. I didn't get a chance to do any of this stuff.
Wait, is that true? You quit hockey in high school?
Yeah, I quit my junior year. I missed the whole season. My junior year, I wanted to focus on football under Bob Shannon at CBC. I absolutely loved it. And, again, it's one of those weird routes where that's what I wanted to do. That's what I enjoyed doing. And luckily it all still worked out. But, growing up, there were certainly the Paul Stastnys that were getting recognized and going playing juniors. And then he goes up to Denver. But, listen, in my household, it was summertime was for pouring concrete. Hockey was from August to April, and that's it. You put the skates away and you go do other things. So the camps, all the prospect stuff, all the U18, I was never really a part of that. Certainly jealous looking back. It's again, one of those things you regret. You're like, oh, maybe coulda, shoulda, woulda. You've been in those situations to represent your country. I can't even imagine the feeling. You see it in the players. There was maybe a couple question marks about the intensity of this tournament. But I think that we can put all those rumors and murmurs aside, because this is about as good as it gets, guys. And I don't know what the NHL is going to do, but I can't see them going back to an all-star game after this. This is just too good.
No, you go back to an all-star game, they're going to have every team just opt out because the players are going to be like, no, we're going to go to Cancun for the week off. So, Joe, on the NHL side of things, Blues going back at it on Saturday, and we've heard Jim Montgomery, I think, speak about 3 or 4 times now, talking about wanting to see consistency with his group. Said, I'm not really worried about the end result. I'm worried about the day-to-day building. Is that where this team is at now? Even though the playoffs aren't like mathematically out of the question, it's not so much about that as it's about the individual consistency?
Individual consistency, you got to compete. You got to be there in the end of every game. I can tell you guys again how important the development process is for young players to be in games late, for it to be a 2-1 game, to pull your goalie and to have a 6-on-5 with Zachary Bolduc out there. Come April, Jimmy Snuggerud, who's in front of the net when you're trying to get a goal. Is it a young player in Dvorsky who's out there late, blocking a shot, killing a penalty when you're up by a goal? All those things, these young players have to feel the intensity of those moments. That's where, having good goaltending and having a good structure, having a good coach, and making sure you got veterans pulling the rope in the right direction, because you need to be in those games. It's a slippery slope. When you start really throwing in the towel, like you see what San Jose is doing, Chicago Blackhawks are a bad hockey team. You're losing games. You're losing 4, 5, 6 in a row. You're losing by big margins. That is not good for development, and that's, of course, where Doug Armstrong continues to push the pace and wanting to stay competitive. And ultimately, I always think it's the right call, because, this whole idea of throwing in the towel for different things, it's just, to me, it's not worth it.
Hey, Joe, it's always great to catch up with you, man. I know it was a busy day for you travel-wise, so thanks for filling us in where you could. We appreciate it as always. Looking forward to hearing you back on the call. Blues versus Jets this week, and we're getting back into Blues action, so we'll talk with you again soon, my man.
Thanks so much, boys. You guys have a great one.
Absolutely. That's Joey Vitale joining us as he does each and every Thursday. Now that we are back into Blue season, appreciate him joining us today as always. He's Alex Ferrario. That's Tanner Hendrickson. I'm Brandon Kiley. On the other side, we'll put a bow on this thing with our BK and Ferrario Rewind and give you a chance to score another pair of single-session passes to see the 2025 State Farm Missouri Valley Basketball Conference Tournament. We'll get into that next year on BK and Ferrario. A little bit of news to pass along in the soccer world where, by the way, St. Louis City SC back in action this weekend.
Maybe they kick off?
And they do indeed. And we will talk about that tomorrow here on the show as Carol Kendall Betts, she laid down the gauntlet over the last couple of days.
She said she was excited for the season and just anything can happen?
Yeah, no, she said, quote, the expectation for 2025, we will make the playoffs. There is no waiver. Yes, that is the expectation. Unfortunately, for some fans, that will not be taking place with Andy Vassilev. He has been traded to Philadelphia. Now, some have wondered, why would they do that? That seems like a weird trade for them. Well, Taylor Twellman tweets out, Vassilev made it known to his teammates that he did not want to be there anymore. So, quote, good business by the club to find the right deal, end quote.
Cut the dead weight. Don't want to be there, you got to move on from them. Did they get something back in return that upgrades their team?
GAM money.
Sweet.
Not cash, but GAM. So that's what they got.
We will make the playoffs.
So that's the latest when it comes to St. Louis City. Again, Carolyn Kindle is telling everybody that will listen. The expectation is that they will make the playoffs. We'll talk about that a little bit tomorrow. T-Bone, do you have any thoughts on this, on trading Vassilev this close to the season?
It's an interesting move, and especially now that you have a new head coach that's trying to implement his style, and Vassilev wants out, which was kind of like a Swiss Army knife for them. And I think Carnell is at Philadelphia, if I'm not mistaken.
Coach,
so you just gave him right back to the guy that really enjoyed his game. So I don't know. It's something to monitor with this club, especially coming off a down year, new coach taking over a core that he didn't really implement. I'll be curious to know what that looks like as we get into the season.
Yeah, it is an open-ended question. Why didn't you want to be here?
Yeah.
What was it? Can you explain that a little further, Taylor? Because
we want to follow up.
Would love to know what it was specifically that led to Vassilev saying, I'm good. I would love to be anywhere else other than here.
Because typically the problem is when one guy says, I don't want to be here, you worry about a trickle-down effect.
Yeah. Is there something that's rotten? Is this a problem? Or is it just hey, this guy,
loved Carnell.
T-Bone, you know how this is in soccer. There's movement like crazy. You think the NBA has movement? Dude,
welcome to soccer.
Soccer
world
is insane with that stuff.
And
it's part of what is hard. The barrier of entry for a fan to get into soccer is really high because there's so much that changes. It's almost like college basketball in that regard.
Yeah, and to add to your point of the trickle-down effect, I remember raising alarm bells last year when it was, hey, they fired Carnell, they traded Tim Parker, who was a part of the original core, and how quickly they dismantled that team of, hey, we went from being the best team in the Western Conference to, hey, this has really gone south, and they started plucking and pulling away from that team consistently.
All right, let's get through a couple of our big topics from today. First one, of course, is my Missouri Tigers. They can beat anybody in the country. I said earlier today, this team is capable of winning the national title. It's not the expectation, but they're capable of doing so. I think they're a legit top 10 team right now with the way that they're playing. Their resume won't necessarily reflect that because they played such an awful non-conference slate, which was understandable. They wanted to rack up the wins. That was supposed to help them get into the tournament, but now we're talking about seeding instead of whether or not they're getting in. Alex, last night to me was just an example of, wow, this team's probably going to be a 3 or a 4 seed in the tournament. They can beat anybody in the country, and they just played one of the best offensive games that I've ever seen from a Missouri basketball team. On the hockey side of things, we got Team USA versus Team Canada tonight. What's the number one thing you're looking for?
It's Binnington. I'm just wanting a really fun game. I think a lot of people are saying, is there going to be a fight? Frankly, I don't know if they could live up to what the last one was, so it just feels like you're pushing for it. But you're going to get a close-scoring game, in my opinion. I think there's going to be less than 5 goals scored. And honestly, I'm watching Binnington. Not so much for the Blues, but more personally for him. I think this is a legacy moment for how many people, specifically nationally, look at Jordan Binnington and think he's an average goaltender. And you might still believe that. But you go out there and you perform in a game like this, like you did in Game 7 back in 2019, you're a big-game goaltender. And to me, those matter more than a regular season goaltender.
I'm interested to know if Team USA is going to bring the same physicality they did against Canada because they are so beat up right now. Both Kachuk's dealing with something. Austin Matthews dealing with something. They lost a defenseman in the previous game. And in that game against Sweden, now they got really injured. They were down to 10 forwards, and the game didn't mean anything. I didn't think they were as physical, and they lost that hockey game. And that was a big attribute to why they were able to beat Canada because they just beat the ever-living hell out of them. I'm curious to know if they're still going to bring the boom tonight as they did last time they played round robin.
Canada didn't have Cale Makar when they played USA the last time. So,
that too.
And this team, USA's out without Charlie McAvoy.
Yeah, it's.
Actually, I was thinking of McAvoy that got hurt.
He's got a shoulder infection.
It's a tall task.
Yeah.
I am going to go with USA in this one. I think it's 4-3. I think it will be a little higher scoring. Last time the game was so tight. It was such a tight checking game. I think Canada's going to make some adjustments. I do think that makes it a little more free flowing, and that could end up helping Team Canada. I think the U.S. has enough skill that they'll be able to adjust accordingly.
Yeah.
Looking forward to this one, man. This is about as good as you're going to get. We'll certainly be breaking this thing down in every possible way tomorrow on the show. We'll talk a little bit about City as they head into their opening weekend. Guys, spring training begins this weekend in terms of the games as well. Cardinals versus the Marlins on Saturday, so we'll have a little bit of that to talk about. Plenty to get into here on BK and Ferrario on our Friday edition, live tomorrow from the Centene Community Ice Center. Right now is your chance to score a pair of single-session passes to the 2025 State Farm Missouri Valley Conference Men's Basketball Tournament. The MVC tournament is hitting the court March 6th through the 9th at Enterprise Center. All session and single-session passes are on sale right now. You can find out more information at 101ESPN.com, but all week long on all of the shows here on 101 ESPN, you have a chance to win a pair of single-session passes. Right now is that chance. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service X line to do so. If you are texter number 101 with the correct answer to the following question, you will get that pair of passes to see the MVC tournament. Earlier today, T-Bone came back with the wrong song, wrong bed, leading into one of our segments. What was that song? What was that bed supposed to be? If you have the correct answer, your texter number 101, you're getting the passes to see the MVC tournament. For Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. We'll talk to you guys tomorrow at 11 a.m. The Fast Lane's coming up next here on 101 ESPN.